Uh, Good evening. Calling to order the council session, council work session, February 21st, 2024. Welcome, council. Welcome to our audience and our guests. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Knoll?
Here.
Ms. Atrach?
Here.
Ms. Weltman? Here. Ms. Godin?
Here.
Mr. Lemay?
Here.
Mr. Gentile?
Here.
Dr. Wong?
Here.
Great. Again, good evening. Our first agenda item would be the approval of the council minutes of January 17th and 24th. Could we have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
For the 17th, any discussion? If not, roll call, please.
Mr. Knoll?
Abstain.
Ms. Atrach?
Yes.
Ms. Weltman?
Yes.
Ms. Godin?
Yes.
Mr. Lemay?
Yes.
Mr. Gentile?
Yes.
Dr. Wong?
Yes.
Thank you. And next, a motion for the approval of the minutes of January
24.
24th.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Knoll?
Abstain.
Ms. Atrach?
Yes.
Ms. Weltman?
Abstain.
Ms. Godin?
Yes.
Mr. Lemay?
Yes.
Mr. Gentile?
Yes.
Dr. Wong?
Yes.
Okay, great. Our first substantive issue tonight is I'd like to introduce representatives of MKSK, a landscape architect firm. You see their name up on the screen. And we have with us tonight landscape architect Susie Mauer, as well as her colleague Michael Mears, who's a planner, I believe.
Planner and landscape architect.
And a landscape architect. Well, welcome here this evening. Just to set the table a bit for council, we had set out an RFP to a number of landscape architect firms. We interviewed some of them. It was a robust day where we interviewed, was it four companies? And Mr. Newell was with us that day, representing council and on the from the infrastructure committee. We also had Mr. Advent, Mr. Brzezinski, Don, myself. I think that's everyone, I believe. Am I missing anyone? There were a lot of us in the room talking to these folks. As a result of the presentations, it is our recommendation that MKSK and its team that you see before you this evening receive our support and charge to develop our Gates Mills Boulevard median to become the linear park that we have talked about for several years. Scott, is there anything you want to add at this point, or you want to save your comments for the end?
Well, before we hear their presentation, we were fortunate enough to hear it. And I will say that all of the companies we heard from were very competent, but they stood out head and shoulders above the others as far as I'm concerned in terms of knowing what Pepper Pike is about, knowing the area, knowing the feel. And I hope you will, when you see the presentation, you will see what I mean.
Okay, so with that, again, welcome here this evening, and look forward to your presentation.
Great. Well, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, council members. It's great to be here. Those are great words. We always like to hear positive feedback when we do these types of things. We're really excited to be here. Really excited about your project. Susie and I are both, born and raised on the east side of Cleveland, so we know this area. We've lived it. We've been here a lot. I'll just real quickly go My name is Michael Mears. I'm a planner and landscape architect with MKSK. I've been with MKSK for about 2 years now.
I'm Susie Maurer. I'm a landscape architect, associate at MKSK. Also been with the firm about 2 years, but been practicing landscape architecture for the past 15 years. And you know, these kind of projects are what I love and what I'd like to keep doing. So this is an exciting project for me to be working on.
Yeah, I think that's one thing we really want to sort of make clear is that this is sort of the ethos of both us locally, but then also our firm, broadly speaking, both in terms of our team here in Cleveland, but the larger team we have at MKSK throughout our different offices. One of our taglines is we're passionate about people and place, and we really strive to find out and understand the local nature of every project and really sort of bring that out and connect people to their place is really another one of our big taglines. We've been in practice for a long time. We have a deep bench and a lot of experience doing these type of projects throughout Ohio and then, throughout the nation with our offices kind of scattered about. So I think one of the big things that we bring is we bring kind of that nationwide expertise, but a real local knowledge and a local feel. And that's something that we're really adamant about when we do a lot of our work. So this is sort of really our bread and butter a little bit. And we're really excited about this project, and we hope that you guys see that both in terms of here today and the work we bring. As we kind of go through this, one of the things we're going to do is just start large scale, give you an idea of some of the sample of the projects that we worked on as a firm, and then sort of give you some of the examples of projects that we worked on, both Susie, myself, and other members of our team have done here locally that kind of fit in terms of what you're trying to do or similar projects in scale and size of the Gates Mills Boulevard Trail.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your firm, or are you going to get into that? The big firm, the whole
So
firm.
the big firms, yeah, I mean, we have an office here in Cleveland.
12 offices over the Midwest.
How many?
12
okay.
offices. Mhm.
Headquartered in Columbus is sort of the hub, but we have offices in Cleveland, Cincinnati, Detroit, Chicago. We've been practicing landscape architecture, urban planning, urban design for over 30 years now. We've won awards in a variety of scales, worked on a variety of different projects, anything from the Arena District in Columbus to other large scale projects to smaller parks in places like New Albany and Dublin and things like that.
One of the things that sets our office apart from, say, Smith Group or AECOM is we are strictly planners and landscape architects, where a lot of other design firms that you would, that we would compete against for these projects are potentially also like architects involved or engineers or, so we're strictly focusing on planning and landscape architecture.
And feel free to interrupt us and ask additional questions at any time. So just to give you an idea, as we start sort of big scale, thinking about projects as we did, this is the Rose Run Corridor Planning Greenway in New Albany, Ohio. This is the idea of thinking about, your trail, this opportunity of a linear park, and thinking about it a bit more than just a trail. This was sort of a underutilized stream corridor that really wasn't, functioning in the way that you could see it now. But the idea here is thinking about like the linear trail running along the street like you have here. There's additional trail that runs along the stream, the kind of the restoration component. The building you can see there is the library. So that part of this too is also sort of connecting campus and connecting assets that already exist. Thinking about connecting where we are in the playground to the trail and connecting the trail to different places. And one of the key aspects of this project was, really trying to thinking about additional aspects of the trail, making it a place you want to be. Not something you just pass through kind of all the time, but are there moments and other sort of vignettes we can call them, or little crumbs or other things?
Placemaking.
Yeah, placemaking for people, things for people to go. So it's not just something you may walk or run and jog on, but it's a place for you and your family to go. And where are those potential spots and different locations to do those types of
Yeah,
things.
so it was essentially a half-mile trail that connected, the library with the village center, and then it had a variety of pedestrian entrances that allowed people to enter onto this trail.
And then just kind of building on that, so the Scioto Audubon Metro Park, this was also a larger park project that had, a different series of trails running through it. in terms of restoration and sort of getting people around. And then the idea here is, there was an opportunity for an observation deck or sort of this, overlook over the, the wetlands and riverfront. So, the ideas are really into that placemaking component and what are the different opportunities that we find, working on your project to do these different, little rooms or little opportunities, whether it's overlooks, places to sit, places for respite, those type of things. And then another project we worked on was in Cincinnati, Ohio. It's called Lawson Way. And the exciting thing about this one was that, slightly more urban project, but it gave people access, thousands of residents directly adjacent to the trail, access to this amenity that wasn't previously there. This was a rail to trail conversion. Obviously, we all know the history of the Great Lakes. Gates Mills Boulevard, was potentially supposed to be, we never got the rails that were supposed to be there. But the one key element about this one is it's a small piece of a larger project. If you look at the map, it's kind of, you can see this is where, the current trail was, but there's potential in the long-term vision connecting south and both north. And, for your project, obviously that's a key component. You already have the connection kind of moving west, but how does that trail fit into the connection moving east? But this was a really great project just because, it created that amenity immediately for the surrounding neighborhood.
Served about 100,000 residents just within the 1 mile area.
And then kind of thinking about additional projects we worked on, I bring this one up just more as in terms of visualization. We did a multi-use trail feasibility study for the Olentangy River in Delaware, Ohio. And obviously you guys aren't directly adjacent to a river, but this was an example of what we worked on in responding to community comments and visualization and really kind of showing people what the trail would look like, along the riverfront. This had a unique one where they had an existing bridge. So we were showing people how we were thinking about activating that bridge for the trail. But really the image on the left is really just kind of highlighting, how we would, during the process, really sort of convey the design ideas to the public so they could get an understanding of, what the improvements might look like, what the trail along the river might look like, what those boardwalks or overlooks along the riverfront may look like as the trail kind of went through the sort of design and development process for creating those, those placemaking moments and those opportunities. And then just thinking about, as we kind of zoom into more locally, I was a project manager for the Solon Connects project in Solon, working with Mayor Kraus heavily on kind of developing a bike and trail connectivity plan for all of the city of Solon, including the Solon to Chagrin Trail, which they're trying to implement now. So, we've been through this process, our team locally and sort of, firm-wide in terms of developing these concepts and figuring out, how to make trails unique for each location, specifically to that community, specifically to that community's needs, understanding what the residents want, thinking about safety, thinking about access points, and how can we really make sure that the trail works for everybody, and is really something that people can be proud of. And then lastly, just touching on a couple other things, I was also the project manager for the Cuyahoga Greenways plan. So I know that your project has been something that's been identified as a line on a map, even going back to the East Side Greenways plan, which was the precursor for the countywide plan. And so it's just really exciting for me, who's kind of seen this project sort of be something that, as everybody's kind of identified as sort of like a critical gap, or in this plan, we call it a regional link. So it's really cool to kind of see that, the process and where you guys have, have come and where the project has come. And, one of the things I really want to stress is, and we've always in our work, the trail and the places are more than just a line on a map. This, when people think about it, they're like, hey, that's a really great connection. Let's put a line there. That would be a really great thing. But when we get into the details and we really work out and we work with you and we work with our team, the goal is to take that line from a map and really understand that that's a place. Like there's more to it. Each one of those lines on the map has a different character, has a different neighborhood, has different access points, different topography, different relationships. So it's really important for us to understand that and kind of build upon that idea and take it from just a line on the map to an actual place that people really care about and really get excited about.
So I'm going to speak about Red Line Greenway. So this is a project that Cullen from our office managed. And really, we were working with Cleveland Metro Parks on this to create connection and placemaking within sort of an awkward area where that definitely needed movement, pedestrian movement, bicycle movement. And with this project, it was challenging because we were heavily working within the right of way of RTA. So there was a lot of stakeholder interactions and a lot of challenging, just moments to try and create spaces. And it really came out great, just the way that we were, up against such a heavy used rail line, but we were still able to work around a lot of our challenges. This one is, again, Project Cullen. And Cullen, we haven't introduced her, but she's the principal of our office. So you would see her face as well. She just came back from maternity leave. That's why she just hasn't been able to show her face yet. But this is the Towpath Trail connector, which this is actually, you'll notice, maybe you're familiar with the Tremont area. And this portion of it was really exciting because within a larger pathway, we were able to carve out and start defining spaces and really using the character of the neighborhood. So you see, the monolithic stones and the Corten steel, like hearkening to some of the features that were present within the neighborhood. It had a historical component. It was called Camp Cleveland. And so there were moments where we were able to put historical markers and really get into a lot of the past history of that place to make it really special and create an identity for that location. So it just, not so that it looked like just another trail, but really so it had meaning within the place. So then this is a project I just finished construction documents on. We were working with Summit Metro Parks. They were our client, and this is phase 4 of Freedom Trail. You may have heard of it. It's down in Akron. It's an overall 9-mile course. But we actually were focusing on the very last half mile, which was a tiny space, but had a number of challenges. It's a CSX rail line. And so again, there's a lot of history and character. So we were able to really have fun with providing furnishings, plantings, lighting, and really like define it according to what the feel of that area looked like, the industrial Akron feel. It's a really exciting project, I think, for the Metro Parks because it allowed them to really get into the details. It was fun because we also got to work with their landscape architects and arborists and get into the plant lists that are native and local to that area. And also, just coming up with a comprehensive plan for them to be able to take care of it moving forward without any trouble with their, staff and maintenance crews. And that's going into construction this summer. And that's it.
Yeah, so we try to keep it brief. Obviously, we're here to answer any questions, but hopefully from that you get an overview of both our experience, our passion, and our understanding of projects similar in scale and technology to the one that you guys have.
I like that you said instead of just laying down a line through the grass, whatever, because I'm thinking like if I was like, hey kids, let's go take a walk, they'd be like, no. But like one of your first slides where it had like some just different features and stuff that would make it more interesting.
Couldn't agree more. It's kind of sterile now because the trees are immature. It's wide open. There's no place to go. So your idea of putting some places to go and sit and just reflect. 30, 40 years from now, the trees will be big for our children and they'll enjoy it. But right now, up to you to make those places go. And I have hiked both the Red Line, Green Line, and the Towpath connector, and those are very nice. Very well done, particularly. That goes down by the steel mills. You can go all the way out to the lake there. That's a great path.
Yeah, there were challenging moments to it.
No doubt,
It
yeah.
was definitely rewarding outcome.
But putting little places like you had where the stones were just a place to sit for a moment, and you're going by Tremont, so you're hitting Tremont right there,
And
which is
views, just be able to have
Yeah.
views too.
Yeah.
So So I really appreciated that each project looked unique to the community. I'm very invested in the appearance of this project as well as the function. I've probably been talking about it for probably the whole time I was in council, but heavily for the past year, because I think it makes a huge difference.
Definitely.
And I don't know if you're aware, but this community has cobbled together that land. It wasn't originally owned by this community. It was owned by a whole bunch of entities. So this is like, to me, who grew up here, and a project that's been a long time coming. And I'm very invested in making sure we get it right. And to me, that means honoring the historic Western Reserve character, the Chagrin Valley character, and it connects all us to Shaker, which is what we are an offshoot of. So to me, it's a fantastic project. And I was wondering if you could speak to how we would, kind of make it unique to Pepper Pike. I mean, I don't want to get too far down the road, but what we could do, because I wouldn't want it to look like, there were things on one or two of these that looked really cool and modern
Mhm.
and in a city environment. I would think that would be appropriate,
Right.
but there are people who live adjacent to it and we all pass through there.
For
So I'm
sure.
curious how this would kind of be unique to Pepper Pike.
Yeah, I think, there's two ways to approach it. Well, there's many ways to approach it, but I would, the historical aspect of any community is like very intriguing for me. And I think I think people who live in a community, they want to know how it became, and like where they came from, how this all happened. So, thinking about it in terms of bringing in maybe moments for, historical signage that's individual to Pepper Pike. That's one way to approach it. Or also thinking about it just to be respectful to the neighbors around it. They don't want, maybe some people don't want this to look like a park that anybody from anywhere can come to. They want it maybe to feel like an extension of their lawn or their backyard. And so also like approaching it in a more sensitive way so that it's maybe the plantings and the details are a little more sensitive to a residential feel, not like boldly like a civic feel. So
And looking like maybe well, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, and looking like it's probably been there. So the
That's
fact
good.
is if people come to Pepper Pike and they've never been, the fact is that the trail and the plantings, obviously the trees need time to grow and everything,
Mhm.
but in a couple of years, hopefully it looks like it's something that's always been.
yeah, timeless.
And I also think too, this part of, obviously we know there's a connections to Beechwood and to Shaker. But I think the one thing that's unique about yours is because the Beechwood side has so much programming and so much intensity that, you don't have to, not that you would, because Pepper Pike has a different feel than Beechwood already, but you don't have the pressure to, replicate any of that, the higher uses and the intensity that comes along with what the trail and that sort of part of the median looks like, when you cross over Richmond and there's parking lots and those kind of things. So I think that's a real benefit in terms of, thinking about the design and the layout and how it functions is that, you kind of have a little bit more of the opportunity to have it sort of fit in and weave in with the character of neighborhood. Because you won't have sort of this, potential demand or, not that you would, but, the desire to like, well, where are we going to put parking or these other things? Because, a lot of those uses and a lot of those things already exist in different locations on the trail.
No, I appreciate that. And I see some of these and it looks like I've spent a lot of time in the Seattle area and they have a lot of interconnecting parks that look natural and historic as opposed to, of the
Yep.
moment. And
Yep.
then in 10 years,
Yep.
look like they were from,
From the 70s.
70s or the
Yeah.
90s or whatever it is,
Yeah.
whatever vintage you think is
Mhm.
dated,
Of
right?
course.
Kathy?
So I heard a lot about like placemaking and things like that. But what strikes me about Pepper Pike is that we're really green. And a lot of residents are really concerned about a big 10-foot swath going through the middle of the green space. So what are you going to do to protect privacy and protect the green space so that people aren't like just looking at the asphalt?
Right.
Because placemaking, that means you're sitting in front of someone's house and you can see them with their pajamas on and they can see you sitting outside. So I think that's a big concern for our community is privacy. Because if you're on the Beechwood Trail when you're on there, you don't really see any of the houses. You have trees all around. So what are you or can you do to address that? Because I think you have to really focus on the trees and the greenery.
Yeah, exactly. And we spoke a little bit about this during our interview too. This question came up about ways to create mounding and other like softscape, we call landscape softscape features that help to like nestle the placemaking in like away from the other functions of like the residential, the view shed, to protect the view shed so that, the two different functions can happen without interruption to each other. Often we do a lot of mounding in hills, like small hills, but big enough to prevent, any crazy sound or, site constrictions. The other thing is, we would really love to introduce canopy shade trees, and that would help quite a bit. Obviously, evergreen trees are a wonderful way to create, sort of like screening is a good way to say it. That is natural and good for the environment and, makes everybody happy. We had talked a little bit too, just about, the seasonal native plantings and how, like, even though sometimes we can't always do large trees everywhere due to sight lines and safety and security reasons, or if there's, like posts and poles that may interfere. But, varying it with understory trees and then canopy trees and just allowing a variety of different planting styles.
You just mentioned light posts, but we're not putting light posts.
Yeah, I don't know if there's
right?
lighting.
No.
I'm like referencing in
Okay.
general strategies we use for other projects as well.
Okay. Because I think the main focus is the green
Mhm.
and to maintain the green and protect privacy of
Mhm.
the residents on the street. I live there. I know.
Yeah.
You don't want someone parked out in front of your house just hanging out and looking inside.
Mhm.
There needs to be a screen.
Mhm.
And just
Yeah,
to, I'll go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, I think with that too, it's Susie, it's like working with the topo and the plantings, and then also just even the orientation of those spaces, right? Are they, if there's a place to sit, is it facing down the corridor as opposed to across the
Right.
street? And how does someone, when they stop and they enter that space, which way are they facing? I've run up and down, the boulevard a bunch of different times, and when you look back down towards towards downtown West, it's beautiful, right? You can get some really, fantastic views. So it's kind of that idea of how are we framing those moments for the people and framing those view sheds. So if you're sitting down and you're taking a view, it's meant to be in this direction. And we're using the topo and the planting and the mounding and other elements to do that. So that way, it's not just like a straight line and we drop a bench down and that bench is just sitting there and it's just.
Yeah. I think it,
So I think I want to understand like what to expect from you and your team, because I know that our engineer kind of laid down a light plan for where the path would go.
Mhm.
Are you then kind of working on top of his site plans with that and then creating these vignettes and stuff? Like what should we expect?
Right, for sure. So a part of the schedule, and I didn't include it here because, it'll probably be a little bit of a give and a take and a change. But what we have sort of proposed is a schematic design development, and construction and document process, which is very typical for how we work with engineers. So Chagrin Valley Engineering being the prime on the project, we would be a sub to them. And typically in a design relationship like that, they are responsible for, getting the site survey, and then, they set up the meetings, and we, they kind of direct us. And so we're kind of under their umbrella a little bit, but we go through the process of creating several interim checkpoints where we present designs, several designs at the beginning, and then we hone into the ideas that are preferred by you all and by any stakeholders that might be involved. And then, we just keep going through a phase of refining, and there will be 3D visuals that are presented with that as well. And there will likely be another, council presentation once we get to the final design.
Okay.
Have you ever worked with Chagrin Valley Engineering?
Yeah, we're
before?
working with them right now on Calgary Neff, which is a city of Cleveland. There are 2 parks that the city of Cleveland are renovating currently, and it's been a lovely working relationship. So yeah, and I've actually worked with them in residential as well. So in my past.
Would you be able to provide your presentation to Sheila so that we can, she
Absolutely.
can send it on to all of us so we can
Absolutely.
look at it a little bit more? Thank you.
Was your prior presentation bigger? Was this
It was exactly this, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, about the same. We may have, dived in a little bit deeper, but
It was exactly the same. I was going along my notes and you followed it very well. The one thing I would like to bring up, because that I had made a note about, is that right now we have basically a bunch of mowed grass in the middle there.
Mhm.
And I know that there are trends to get away from that a little bit. Can you explain what those are and what you have in mind?
Yeah, for sure. And similar to, it's hard, I want to constantly reference this project we just finished construction documents on the Freedom Trail project, because that was where we were working with Summit Metro Parks to really get a really nice no-mow grass that, they don't have the staff that can be out there maintaining, wildflowers and like natives that need like this 3-year long process and a special mowing arrangement. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that process of creating a prairie and like naturalizing, but it's a labor of love. And so we worked with them on different grass types, like no-mow grass, which is a really nice fescue, which is about 6 to 9 inches high, and it really kind of ends there. There's no mowing needed. It's native, and so these are some of the options we're really interested in as an office. And we've recently started our lab MKSK, which is a climate change, addressing climate change and the climate crisis within our office. And so a lot of these topics right now are forming into how we detail projects and our specs on plantings as well.
So that kind of tails into one of my questions and it was sort of along those lines. So these little vignettes along the way, we're already adding a lot of paved material.
Mhm.
And one of the concerns in this area, in addition to things like putting appropriate plantings as far as native or, what would not be invasive, for example, is also water. And so I was curious, are these vignettes mostly plantings or permeable areas versus more paving, or how does that work?
I mean, I think it all depends on once we kind of work through the different options that we talked about at SD. I mean, maybe there's, depending on, where the arrival point is, if it's, you're crossing the street and maybe there's a trailhead and maybe that is paved, it's a little bit of an expansion of the trail, the pavement for that location for, people coming and going. But maybe, like in this example here, it's a different type of, material as you get further down the trail, or maybe, in the middle of it, depending on where it is. So I think a lot of it comes into just sort of as we work through the different options, what fits best where, in terms of both the character and the context, and, what we think the user groups,
Sure.
might be. But I think, to Susie's point and, just kind of the larger point, I mean, we would want everything we would select in terms of materials, whether it's a bench type, planting type, obviously natives, but material selection, bench selection, all those type of things we would want it to fit within the character and nature of, not only, the city of Pepper Pike, but then kind of just the trail and the vision in itself. And then on top of that, the idea of thinking about durability, and the fact is it's not something that you would need to go out and constantly maintain and those type of things as well. So it's sort of a combination of all of those and kind of working through the process, and with our team and with the engineers team and the stakeholders as well as figuring out where those.
Because we're constantly fighting a battle of how to move water.
For sure. I
Yeah.
was going to address that. The bioretention project that's just down the road, and just the recent things that have been done at the median over by Ratner, it's really interesting. Like, just we're instituting a lot of those techniques in our designs too. So bioretention swales and engineering ways that we can soak in water and like use that water with a combination of native plants to be like percolating, in the best way possible and not creating to suspended solids that run all over the streets and, so
Mhm.
like just instituting those.
Gotcha. I appreciate that.
I have a question. You guys have a lot of experience in these trails. What do you think that you could provide to provide safety, especially like the other day I was on Beechwood Trail and some e-bike that looked like a motorcycle was coming down really fast. Like, are there any techniques that you guys have in your back pocket? I don't know if e-bikes are even allowed, but if
Yeah.
they were, like,
I would say that shouldn't be allowed on this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
So a combination of, signage, hopefully people are following the signs, but, there's also techniques like, even in roadways, people use chicanes or other like speed bumps or other ways to like, kind of gently
Meander.
design in
Yeah.
little barriers that would make it uncomfortable for somebody at high velocity to go through the site. And that's also where Chagrin Valley would come in and be the expert on how to calculate all those, maybe there's like a super elevation or maybe the trail like goes up a little or down, just ways to kind of slow down speeds. That was an issue we had again on the Freedom Trail project where we had this crazy, as you can see, the switchback,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it was probably a 30% slope, and we were just so worried about bikes zooming past people because it was a shared use path. So we did a lot of like, yes.
Yeah, I think it might be tough because one of the things that we expect to happen is that, children will be able to ride their bikes.
Yeah,
So you
I
can't,
think you can allow like little bikes, but not the e-bikes. Or
no,
the guy-
you
or the
can, but
guys-
I mean, if you make physical impediments to the e-bikes, then wouldn't they still be physical impediments to the little kids' bikes, with the training wheels?
Let me jump in a little bit. I think what you try to do is create a design speed that's comfortable for little kids, and also somebody who wants to go 30 miles an hour on an e-bike, it's not comfortable for them. So you find that 15 to 20-ish mile an hour design speed, and that's why you do create some gentle meanders and some up and down. These aren't humps or really tight turns.
And
You're safe and navigate.
speed bumps or anything like that.
No, you really don't want to. You don't want to create some type of a hazard
Right.
that would be a challenge for, a young rider. Plus, it all has to be ADA accessible and that kind of thing. I think what you end up doing, there are some very basic e-bikes that are not fast, but they also have ones that can go 50 miles an hour.
Yeah.
You can prohibit the high-speed stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's what a lot of people are doing now.
Yeah, like the e-bikes have like rating scales.
There's
and
classifications,
like,
right.
Yeah, and I think, and we talked about this in the interview. I think obviously making it for families and neighborhood friendly, but we all know that Gates Mills is a popular bike route, right? And for a lot for the for lack of a better term, like the spandex crowd. So I think the one good thing is that because it's 2-lane road, and you have that opportunity for people who are training for Belisano or something else, they're not going to hop on that trail because it's going to go
Right.
like
It's gonna
this.
slow them down.
It's going to slow them down. They're going to want to stay in their group and they're going to cruise on by. So, in some of the more urban environments that we've worked on, you do get a lot of that mixing because maybe the streets are really not safe to bike on. So you have to kind of jump off and you get on the trail. And if the trail is just kind of a straight shot, then it equates to riding in the street where, you'll have the straight line for those that want it, and then the potential weave, for the family, and those for the strollers and the dog walkers and stuff.
Do you have an estimated budget now that you've kind of looked at the whole thing? Like, what do you think all the plantings and architecture and
Well, we have to
things like that?
design it first.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah. Typically, we in these phased projects where you go through SD, DD, CD, at each deliverable phase, at the end of every phase, you kind of deliver sort of a package of drawings of where you're at. And with that, we usually also deliver cost estimating too. And that allows you to have like checkpoints to say, this is getting too much, or, and it allows you to make decisions along the way so you hit your target.
The SDDD CD, but can you clarify that for me?
Yeah. No,
Like,
it's fine.
that is,
Yeah.
that sounds like landscape speak or something,
I
so.
mean, it's generally like the architectural nomenclature of
Okay.
how you divide up a design, like how you kind of like simplify the duration of a design process. So schematic design,
Okay.
Design development. So schematic design is like the ideas, the fun stuff, the renderings, the pretty pictures. Design development is when you start to then figure out the details, and then you're getting into line drawings like AutoCAD, and the drafted drawings where you're putting dimensions on things. It's not completely vetted out yet, but you're getting closer. And then construction documents is your actual like legal
Hard.
document that gets stamped and goes on to be built.
Thank you for
You're
explaining that to
welcome.
me. I
No,
appreciate
it's
it.
fine.
It's like a 30, sometimes people do like 30,
Yes,
60, 90.
exactly.
So you
yeah.
can think about it like 30%,
Mhm.
60%, 90%.
Exactly.
Like really getting into the details.
And
Yes.
Then do you specify plant material also?
Yes.
that-
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and size or, and,
Yes.
so,
Yeah.
okay.
And yeah, that usually starts to get like starts out in the design development phase when we start looking at, getting species, showing you all sorts of what we think and where they should go. And yeah,
Because one of the concerns is not putting in trees that are like little
Yeah,
For sure.
sticks that, and I know that gets more expensive.
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe there are
And
opportunities.
big green, evergreen trees that stay green because nobody wants to look at wood during the winter.
Yeah,
6 months
only
out of
those
the year.
sometimes go.
yeah. If you
Yeah.
go with Norway spruce,
Yeah, Norway
I know a lot of times the white pines and the blue spruces
spruce.
go,
Yeah.
with the heavy one because they don't have a deep root system. But the Norway spruces are
As well.
would be my
Yeah.
recommendation. So it's sort of tried and true. But we can look into all of
Yeah,
those.
that's very granular.
I mean, I like the Norways. We've planted over like $100,000 worth of trees in our yard over the last few years, and the
Mhm.
Norways are just like huge
Yeah.
and healthy.
And they're native.
And,
A
yeah.
lot of those blue spruces.
Yeah,
are
the
not
blue
necess-
spruces just
Yeah.
lose their leaves at the bottom and they start to die off.
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
And I think Jim and the service department, now that they've taken over the mowing, they would appreciate that no mow lawn and
Yeah.
less maintenance.
We discussed that.
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted to say that when I first listened to your presentation back during the interview, I was impressed at how you knew the area so well. We would bring things up and you would already know the answer to them. You didn't need to do research. You've had a history of research having been so familiar with the area. And that's why I felt very comfortable with, I think you know the things that all of us are looking for. And so.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I mentioned in the interview, I've driven this route. Like I used to work in residential before MKSK, and we worked out in Newbury, and that's how I knew Dawn from before. And I drove this road every day, and I was like, oh man, if only like they put a sidewalk for these people to walk their dogs, and then the trees. It was a monoculture running down the street, and then I saw what you guys did. After the big gas explosion happened, and I was like, that's what needs to, more identity needs to happen down that strip. So like, this is actually extremely exciting for me to see this happen.
And your enthusiasm comes through, and that's really, I get a good feeling out of that. I hope everybody on council does.
What do we do if we don't like it?
Well, hopefully you're going to be involved in the design process.
Oh, the
and have a
residents,
voice.
we'd like more resident presentations for them. I don't know if that's possible,
Yeah.
but
I think, I think we will figure out sort of the best course of action based on, what you think as council is necessary, because the constituents better than we do and what has been, voiced already. Obviously, there's probably like a lot of people who don't want a construction site in front of their house for a year.
I think in each of those steps you talked about, being back to council and having a meeting just to,
yeah.
even at the conceptual phase, so you can get the big picture from all of us. And
Right.
so I think that's an important
Yeah.
check that will avoid later revisions perhaps.
Yeah.
And I think we focused on a lot of build projects here, and we showed a little bit of renderings that kind of like the visual, but that's, something when you say like, what do we don't like it? Like, that's one of the things we try to make sure is that people are making informed decisions, and the best way that people can make informed decisions is if you give them the right information, right? Sometimes people are visual, and that really helps, so they can kind of see and feel and think about what that looks like. So, we have a deep, of lots of examples of, where we've done that individually, so that way you get an idea whether it's at 30% or 60% of what this is potentially going to look like. So when you get to the end, you're not just kind of like
Yeah.
We want to get to the end of this process so everybody in this room is not surprised,
Right.
right? Like in every project we work on, it's not just we go into a black box and we come back and then we just say, and to your point, that and the residents are just like, hey, okay, so this is what we got. It shouldn't be a surprise when we get to the end that what the design intent is and what the final design goals are. Once we get to that 90% of the CD phase.
I appreciate you saying that because
Yeah.
I do believe that our community is invested in the project as we all are and would love those updates. I would like to know who is going to be part of the committee or, in the talk so that if somebody does have ideas or some thoughts or suggestions that we know who to go for, that it's not a surprise, who's part of the
Right.
team working with you.
Yeah, because
the
I think
communication.
we live here, we're very invested. These are our neighbors. And sounds like same as you, maybe drive through here all the time.
Sure.
So like I said earlier, but I think we all feel this way. The appearance of it and that it fits our community and looks like it belongs in our community is high value to us. And so, personally, very invested. I bet everyone is.
Because it's truly a legacy project,
Mhm.
you know.
It is, and it is, you're creating something that can become the precedent for other communities too. Just Mayfield or, just this, as Michael showed, this overall trail map, this is the grand plan is to have this all be connected. And so you're beginning it. I was also going to say, just in terms of buy-in, just to have everybody feel like their voice is heard. A lot of times in these projects, in the schematic design phase, we do a lot of stakeholder, and I don't know how much will be in this project. We'll have to talk with Don, but in a lot of our other projects, we work a lot at having stakeholder events with the local communities. It's usually at a community center or the library, and you send out flyers and invite everybody, and you just want to make sure everybody has a voice heard. And that'll be up to all you whether you think that's necessary or not. But we do that a lot just to make sure everybody has voiced their opinions.
Yeah, we specialize in community
Yeah.
engagement. I'll just plug that in for you.
That's good.
If that's a process you want to include or, as part of it, that's something that we specialize in all of our work and all of our planning work is community engagement.
I think to the neighbors and the larger community that could be
Yeah.
high value.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I
that's-
think so.
Can I clarify, this is the first stretch, and then theoretically it would be duplicated?
Yeah, because that's how the grant worked.
Right, yeah, I'm just saying, but so your design work for this could theoretically just kind of, not duplicate it, but
Unduplicated,
but you would
ideas,
carry
less
through
than
the broad ideas further up.
materiality or,
Yeah, definitely. We would want to make sure that it was consistent.
So, Rick, what's the next step for hiring these folks? Do we need a resolution or a motion?
What we're going to do is probably, when we're concluded, thank these kind people and excuse them, and we'll entertain a motion and have that conversation, and we can go ahead and negotiate and enter into an agreement with them.
You just mentioned community engagement. I was just wondering if you had experience like making lasting community kind of like bricks and stuff on these parks. And I think a lot of the community residents would like to, contribute in some
Yeah.
way to have like things there, or like if you had a wish list for trees and the city might not afford it, maybe like dedication tree or
yeah,
I don't know,
absolutely.
like
That's a really endearing sentiment that I'd like to take because normally you see those at universities or at more of semi-private institutions, but like the thought of bringing it to this community really makes the community feel like it's
Yeah,
knit.
like attached to it,
Yeah.
and a
Yeah.
part of it.
Well, I think we talked about that also, maybe hinging on it's our centennial
Mhm.
coming up this year. So as you said, a legacy project, and is there a way of leveraging our centennial
Mhm.
to make this, maybe we have some bigger trees, I don't know. So, I know cost a little bit more, or something else, but
For sure. Yeah, those are all
This is first I want to thank you for really a marvelous presentation again.
most
You
welcome.
demonstrated why Scott, Don, myself, Joe, everyone at the first meeting wanted you here tonight. And I appreciate very much your being here. One of the things is Ms. Waltman brought up, there's a history to this linear park that we want to create. And an interesting thing that came up during our examination and for our centennial was going through a lot of old clippings and mayor letters from the last 100 years. And we do a fun fact Friday. And as Melanie mentioned, there was a lot of litigation in the early 70s to acquire the final parcels of that. And that extended from, there had been an initiative by a developer who wanted to get variances to build a series of very small residential lots down the median strip.
Oh, wow.
And it went all the way to the Ohio Supreme Court. And it's a very interesting case.
Yeah.
You can read it. I have it in my
I
office.
would love to.
And, but before that, in our examination of things we could push out to make it fun for people, the centennial, was the discovery that in 1947 and in 51, there were subsequent letters from the mayor at that time announcing how the median strip, which was being used as the village dump, and how they had found a new piggery, some farmer with pigs that was now going to agree to accept all of the food waste and things that were going in the dump. And it was going to help with the rodent control,
That's
which was
great.
and then in the 50s, 51 or so, the same mayor at the time sends out a letter, triumphing that I think it was Bedford had opened up a new open air furnace. And now they could take a lot of the combustibles and take them over to the furnace and burn them up.
Yeah.
And so this strip has had a lifetime.
Oh,
Now,
for
from
sure.
a railroad right away potentially to a village dump to acquisition, the accumulation of land parcels. So this is really a culmination, this project. It's very, very important to the whole history of this community that this be done, right. A lot of people in this network of trails have done well. They've made nice trails. We want a great trail. We want a great park. And so that in, the 20, 30 years hence, people will say, boy, someone had a really good idea here.
Yeah, and to commend you all for having the vision to do this, because this is the time
Wow.
to do it. We're noticing a trend towards, that people want a more healthy living environment too, the walking and health, and this is contributing to, the trend, seeing that happen among our suburban communities too.
So does anyone else have any other questions? Okay, well then, thank you very much for being here
Thank you.
with us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Sheila, do you know when it might be up on the website?
Oh, I don't know. I was just gonna hand them
Oh,
over.
Yes,
Oh.
I will,
Okay.
I can
Yeah.
send that to you tonight.
Thank you.
Awesome.
We're going to take a pause here and allow you
Okay.
guys
Yes.
to
Give me
get
a
yourselves
moment.
together.
We'll try to
No
go as
hurry.
fast as we can.
Those would be the ultimate tiny homes in the median there.
So there were there were those little houses,
In
whatever
front and
they call
behind, you
them.
could go in and out both ways. It was a real plan.
Wow.
I've got the
Thanks
Thank
again.
Thank you,
Bye,
everybody.
thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful
Thank
evening.
you.
I got the, good night, guys. I have the plat of the layout. And it's this wide, the plat, and it just stretches for 13
Stretches.
feet.
Yeah, it seems crazy, but that's what they really thought was a good idea.
All right. So thank you all for being so attentive. I hope it was evident why, listen,
They're great.
there were other people who came. Everyone was wonderful. These guys were just standouts. It was just when the day ended, and it was a full day of interviewing. When it ended, it was just the answer presented itself to all of us as to what the right company to engage here was. Don, you've had successful workings with them.
Yeah, they're really good. And the other companies that we also recommended, we've worked with. I think this is a really good fit for this scope. If we were doing something far more elaborate or industrial or something, maybe go to a different company.
Yes.
These guys are really good.
Yeah, this was for what we do and what we need.
I trust Don.
This seemed to be the right.
I also want to thank you for holding this meeting tonight, that all of us could be in attendance and hear that. I think that that was really great that all of council was here, listening to what they had to say.
Yeah, I thought it was, that's why when
Yeah,
I learned
that was
Melanie
great.
couldn't, I did want to push it.
Yeah. thank
At
you.
the time, I think, potentially three of us weren't.
We're not
going
gonna
be
be
Right.
here.
Yeah.
And it's so important and we had time.
Yeah, so
All right, so what I'd like to do is entertain a motion for us to enter into a negotiation basically at this point with them to enter into an agreement for an amount not to exceed $85,000 for them to design this project. And
That would be phase one of what they're doing,
well, that
or
would be their project.
the whole thing?
Yeah, now as we get into it, we may find there are elements that don't fit in that number, and we come back to the council
Okay.
and talk to you guys about it, but we need a number to begin with, to have a conversation. So I'm suggesting 85 would be,
Is that-
I
Is
think,
that
probably a comfortable
reasonable?
number to have the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a good
That's a range.
range. Yeah, because then, I think it gives us some negotiation. I think they've gotten maybe a little bit of an idea of what the scope would be based on this meeting with council. So there might be some things that they say, I need to have a little bit more this time, or maybe I don't need as much on this particular thing. But some of the renderings and things, I think people seem very interested in that. We want to make sure that there's enough of that to give you guys a really good feel for what
Sure.
you are going to get. So,
And that takes time.
and it takes time. yeah.
Right. If there are going to be a community meeting, if there are going to be two community, all that adds costs that they're going to have to calculate in their own.
I think we could have them present at council as the
Right.
community meeting. I don't know that we need to have, so we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, right.
yeah,
I
let's
just,
not
I don't want to get
ourselves
ahead of
on that,
everything,
like,
but
let's see.
they've heard a lot of things from feedback from council. And I think we're in a comfortable place to have this conversation for us to enter into this agreement, up to that amount right now. And,
So moved.
Second.
okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Newell,
Enthusiastic, yes.
Ms. Atruk,
Yes.
Ms. Weltman.
Yes.
Ms. Godek. Yes. Mr. Lemay,
Yes.
Mr. Gentile.
Yes.
Dr. Wong.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, this is an exciting night, and I congratulate council for getting here. Next, we have another discussion to be had. I found my paper. Who is it? Oh, it's Don Sheedy.
There we go.
It's an
I'm not gonna be
introduction
as
of the
interesting
recommended
as this.
landscape, no, a presentation by the engineer of the Land Road Recreation Trail.
Not a lot of slides for this, but we've talked about trying to determine which side of the street the sidewalk needs to go on, the trail needs to go on. So obviously, that's just a little overview of jumped ahead. Overview of the project, the land and road section up and down the middle, just so everybody's oriented. I really looked primarily from Chagrin to Fairmount. We weren't really focused on the section, from Fairmount to Cedar, because that's not really part of the trail right now. Not that we didn't look at it at all, but that wasn't the focus of the exercise. So, okay, comparison of east side versus west side. So what we did is we actually went out and did a visual inspection of the entire roadway. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit, I think. This helps. So we went in and
Is that 2 slices of the road here?
it is 2 slices of the road.
Okay.
The top slice is, you can see the edge of the circle, and then the bottom slice is just a continuation.
That is, which circle at the left, upper left
Yeah,
is?
yeah. If you look at, that's right there. That is the circle. It shows.
Okay.
Okay. So pretty basic, but the process is we identified things that are going to be a trouble, that are going to create extra work. So that could be anything from a driveway, a sight distance issue, a manhole, a catch basin, utility pole, a hydrant, a water valve, electrical box, trees, ditches, significant landscaping, guy wires. All of those things kind of come into our decision-making process about where to put the walk and what type of a hurdle those different obstacles are going to basically cost. So
Don, just right, the black
Okay.
line that's running horizontally is what?
there's 2 black lines, like one on the top and one on the bottom there. That's the right of way.
That's the right of way?
Yes, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of, it's 86 feet wide. So it's a pretty big swath. The road is about 30 feet. So you got just shy of 30 feet on either side of that is green space. So,
Is it that big for an historical reason?
um,
Was it meant to be 4 lanes sometime? Or
it was a county route. It is a county route.
Okay.
And it was designed, to carry a lot of traffic and also to carry a lot of utilities. I mean, there's
okay.
sewers and, all the electrical poles and everything are larger scale than a typical residential side
Yeah.
street. So we went through and basically put a number, a 1, a 2, or a 3 on things that we came across that we knew were going to be in conflict. So it's sort of a regular residential driveway is a 1. It's going to be some work, not too complicated.
So that's the easiest.
Those are the easiest,
Less costly.
least costly of things to
And a commercial
a commercial
driveway.
driveway is a 2. There's going to be a little more
Bigger.
work. We're going to
Right.
maybe have to get into it a little bit more. It's maybe thicker concrete. And then a 3 is something that's, maybe significant, maybe a very large tree. Maybe there's a sight distance issue or we have to do some grading, or there's a large vault that we need to get moved out of the way. Things like that from a cost standpoint, think of the 1 is somewhere between $1,000 to $2,000. A 2 might be $3,000 to $5,000 range. And then 2 is, $2,000 to $5,000. And then a 3 is something that's probably in the $10,000-ish range. So, let's say 5 to 10,000. So basically we went through the entire city and did this count all the way through. Here's a little further down by Bryce. We've got, you can see there's a hydrant in the way. There's a big electrical box over there by Bryce and some landscaping.
What's that number 3 right there?
That's number 3. There's a very significant retaining wall there, just south of Bryce Road, on Lander, that would be right in the way of where the sidewalk would go.
Okay.
And there's a significant retaining wall and then also very significant
A
landscape.
decorative retaining wall or?
It's decorative, but it's like 3 feet high. So it's significant. It's not just like a little knee wall or
But
something.
that's something the resident did.
Somebody did that 30 years ago, but now it's a big thing. It would be,
Same on the other side of the street?
there's one on the other side, but it's far, it's not really in the way of where the walk would go, and it's fairly modest.
Okay.
So, so that's the process. So
just to clarify, so Donna,
Yeah.
when you're identifying these numbers,
yes,
are they all within the right of way of the sidewalk or the construction path
yes,
of the sidewalk?
they would all be in some way impacted by installing the walk. If it went on the west side, all of those number 1s would,
be right there.
right there.
And would that number 3 there be in the way?
Yeah, it would, because
Even though it's a little further north or a little further?
because what ends up happening is it forces you to maybe put the sidewalk right up against the curb
Mhm.
or meander it significantly.
Okay.
So That meander, I know that's a problem. We don't really, long term, it's not something we're trying to do
Right.
is have this walk close to
Right.
the street. So it creates definitely a design headache. On top of it, there's a hydrant there. There's a bunch of stuff there. So no matter where you put it, something's going to have to give. You go down the entire street and it's all a series of things like that. But what we tried to do is, what we did do is we did a summary. So this is just a list of all the different items that I kind of rattled off before and just did a tally. So the next slide is the tally. Get there. Okay. So from Chagrin to South Woodland on the west side, and then these are weighted. So a 1 is a 1, a 2 is 2 points, a 3 is a 3. So when you add up the numbers, you end up with the higher numbers if there's more significant items on there. So from Chagrin to South Woodland, I have a number of 46 on the west side, a number of 26 on the east side. So it makes sense to put it on the east side for that first segment. From South Woodland to Shaker, it's 79 to 45. Again, it makes sense to be on the east side. And then from Shaker to Fairmount, it's 97 to 64. Maybe not as big of a gap, but still shows that it should be on the east side. If you compare the two, 222 to 135. So it's a pretty significant tilt towards putting it on the east side for those items that are out there in the right of way. In addition to that, you have, and this is statistically, you could put a crosswalk on any one of the legs of the intersection. But if you're going to choose one spot, you probably want to choose the leg that has the least amount of traffic. For what it's worth, the east side of each of those intersections, South Woodland Lander, Shaker Lander, and even if you go up to like Brookwood and Lander, it makes sense to have it on the east side from a safety standpoint. You could put it on either side, but a slight edge to the least amount of traffic.
So so at the Shaker intersection, for example.
Yes,
You're saying crossing on the east side
east side.
has less traffic than crossing on the west side.
Yes,
And why is that?
because people turn left or right on Lander.
Huh.
The further you go out, the traffic kind of drops off. Your morning commute, whatever, there's a lot of through traffic, but that just each leg has the traffic on Shaker, for instance, from Brainerd, from the circle here to Lander is heavier than the traffic from Lander to Somme. Just, as the further out you get, it's less dense. As you get into Hunting Valley, traffic really drops off. So my recommendation based on this is that we do keep it on the east side
Are there any,
for that length.
I like, this is the cost calculation here.
Well, it's cost and then the safety issue
Well,
is sort of separate.
I
Right,
was going to go there. So then you raised on top of that.
Yeah.
Marginally better.
It's not insignificant, but it shouldn't be a huge deciding factor. If everything was equal, be like, well, it would make sense to be a little bit safer to put it on the east side.
East
But
side.
since you also have it that cost wise, the east side makes sense as well. I think it kind of locks it in. The only other piece, and I'll just show this because I think I like to upset people, but this is the meandering sidewalk in orange. And I know that we don't really want to do this. I've got a clear message, I think, from council. So this is what happens if you try to avoid everything. You save some money, but then you end up with something that I think gets awfully close to the street in certain locations and is not exactly what the look is you're going for with this.
And on Lander, your distance from the street is 8
It's about
8 feet?
8 feet from
8
the
street edge
street edge.
to the curb.
Yes.
So just as a point, I know when we discussed it, we didn't want a meandering, undulating pathway like
You mean
that.
from the sidewalk edge?
But
Yes.
I think we still contemplated some mild meanders,
Yes.
and especially if it gave us the ability to avoid some trees or architectural features.
Right.
I don't know that we contemplated it necessarily had to be straight parallel to the road. I mean, I know that was our discussion,
Right.
that there
Right.
might be some, like the first part as opposed to the second part in the picture, I guess is what I.
Yeah. There are some nice longer sections where you could do a very gentle meander and it would be, I think, attractive and not driven by avoidance necessarily. It just, you can make some gradual, a 2 or 3 foot meander over several hundred feet, and it would feel comfortable.
The telephone poles that run on that, our utility poles are on the east
On
side.
the
of
east side
street.
too, yes.
So would it,
It would be
Are we
behind the
pre-
poles.
so we would have pole in the tree lawn and then walkway behind it?
Behind it, yes.
And how far, do you know the distance, how far back our utility poles are?
Um,
Just as like a,
they're at about
Approx.
6 foot, so you'd be a couple feet away from the poles.
So just to make sure I understand, it's the street, pole, sidewalk.
Sidewalk.
So it's not close and you're,
It really isn't.
from a cost perspective.
From a cost perspective, it's not close.
And there's nothing, there's no non-cost factor that would cause you to think about the other side.
No,
Because this side has a slight edge on safety.
it does have a slight edge on
Are there any
safety.
other than cost safety? Is there another bucket of things?
Well, part of the cost bucket, I guess, is also drainage. There's a pretty significant amount of Lander Road on the west side has a little bit of a drainage swale that sits about 20 feet or so off the curb, but it's not consistent. So there's people that have drive culverts on Lander Road. You're like, well, they have a storm system. Why do they have a drive culvert? They still have this little shallow system.
So what's the safety factors that tend to favor the east side?
Just a little bit less traffic where you cross the street. If you have it set up on the east side and you're going to cross, say, South Woodland Road, you want to cross on the east side of the South Woodland Lander intersection. And then you get to,
Are you saying more people turn
there's less,
to the
there's,
west?
there's less traffic. Yeah. There's more traffic.
People turn onto Lander Road north
Yeah,
or
they're
south.
going to turn, a lot of people turn left or right.
'Cause-
And then when you get to Brookwood, and Brookwood's got, it's probably 65, 70 houses, a big subdivision. And there's only one entrance, which you
Yeah.
probably wouldn't design it like that now. And it also happens to be not at a great sight distance spot. So you wouldn't want all of those people potentially wanting to cross Lander kind of mid-block. You'd prefer to keep that on the east side
You mean to get to the side?
to get to the sidewalk if you did put it on the west side. So really, that's another one of those safety issues where, as a practical matter, it does make some sense to keep it on that side. Now, there are other streets on both sides of Lander, but most of them are, 10, 12 houses or something like that.
And they don't have the site.
And they don't have the same sight distance issues, correct?
So
So do we-
despite that, you're going to be facing more traffic coming out of that subdivision. Because you're crossing a road. which
You're
you
crossing
wouldn't-
the road, right,
Which you wouldn't have on the other side.
Right.
Despite that,
right. The pedestrians have to,
have to
Cross.
get to the sidewalk.
right.
And this gives them non-crossing access to the sidewalk.
Correct. And also I guess the nice part at the subdivision at Brookwood, it's a stop condition, so vehicles that are coming up are stopping before they pull out in the Lander. So it's,
Do we also take into consideration the number of driveway cuts? Because one of my concerns has been that it's dangerous for children with, driveways and people backing out of driveways who may or may not.
right.
Yeah, that was number one.
That was, the
The
driveways are
driveway
part of the
cuts.
total.
Would you flip back?
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
But it's driveways and other curb cuts? Is that?
Well, we're trying to add things up that aren't always necessarily all alike, but these are all the items.
So where you say
that are on-
drive crossing?
A driveway counts as at least one column in the negative. So the side with the more driveways is gonna score higher points.
I guess what I'm asking, so say a house has a circular driveway with 2 entry points.
Right.
Versus 1 entry point. That's how we're counting them. I guess that's what I'm
Each
asking.
driveway is
Each of
counted.
those counts as
Correct, correct.
the cut. Okay.
Yeah.
They're good. That's what I wanted.
Provide this tally to us as well? I
Sure.
mean, I know you gave us the totals.
Yes,
well, the whole
So
presentation.
we can see.
how it all lines
the
up.
different
Yeah.
Items, yeah.
Sure. Not-
Do you have the whole street as like those 1, 2, 3
Yes.
things too? Can you
Yes.
provide that to us for the
You
whole
don't,
street?
you don't trust me?
No, I trust you. I just want to see where
Yeah,
it
no,
is.
It's like,
I
you
didn't
just
think
wanna
you'd want to see
know.
5 of those slides,
No,
but
I
yes,
do.
we have
I
all
do
the
wanna
numbers.
see.
Yes, we have all the numbers. Yeah.
I know on that east side, there's these stands of like these beautiful tall trees on that corner. I think it's Lander and South Woodland.
Mm.
Yes.
What's going to happen to those trees? Because
Those-
those are
Well-
amazing. And it's protecting that house from,
And we made a fuss about them keeping those trees when we just did that in planning and zoning.
She's talking about across the street from there.
This is across the street from that.
across the
not
street from the new
The
building.
north
Yeah.
east corner.
Well, yeah, I know what you're talking about, and I gotta say, those
The
trees,
absolute pine trees.
if left unchecked, will be in the roadway eventually. They keep getting bigger and bigger
Yeah.
and bigger. They do need to be cut back. They're not safe really right now.
But they can stay.
The trees can stay, but the branches need to be cut
Right.
back because,
Okay.
they only grow, a foot a year.
right,
Well,
right, right.
10 years later, they're sticking out 10. They're pretty tight right now. And there's actually, I was going to talk to Jim a little bit about that, but you almost have a bit of a sight distance issue
Right.
now because the branches are extending to within maybe 8 or 10 feet of the road. So
Yeah.
there's enough space to get the walk in.
And
They'll need to be trimmed back,
Okay.
but I don't think that'll negatively impact the trees.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Don.
That's the presentation. So
That's-
not as fun
Thank
as the
you.
other
That
stuff.
was very clear, very quantitative. Yeah, I like
Not a
that.
matter of trust at all. It's a
No,
matter
no,
of- it's a matter of understanding.
I'm just
Yeah.
joking.
Don't
Yeah,
be
no,
defensive.
we have sheet after sheet after sheet of those numbers. So I'll be happy to provide those.
And do we know if the country club is like good with? In
It's
front
in the right of way.
It's in the right of way.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Well, that's a long expanse where there's
No, I know.
only one driveway or
Right.
two driveways.
Right.
right.
Yeah.
That is part of the factor that when you're doing the design, that ends up goes in the
Right.
plus column and for it to be in these is there's over 1,000 feet where there's no other driveways.
Right.
Yeah, I think they have two driveways for.
They have two.
Yeah.
They have like a lower driveway and
Service
then the main
driveway and a
driveway.
main driveway.
So what's the next step? Can we do the same thing we did for the first group and,
Well, Don has already
He's
authorized.
got a
the
contract.
design.
This is just.
sorry, I
yeah.
meant like in terms of like, let's move this forward.
Right. The
Right, like-
next step is Don is engaged
Okay.
in the design of the sidewalk. That
Right.
he showed what he
We've already
began
done
doing.
I guess for
And
me,
council's already
So there's no,
authorized.
let's
him.
move
Yeah,
forward.
right.
is it
We're
Okay.
moving
So
forward.
we're underway.
yeah.
Okay.
It's clear though, I think that we're gonna move
Yeah.
forward with the
Yeah,
detailed
yeah.
design on the east
Of
side.
course.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That-
that was my
that's all
question.
I need.
Detailed design.
Yep. Yeah.
Great.
We've talked
Okay.
about that at previous meetings, but you might have
Right.
missed that.
And is that something
Okay.
we can notice, like, just make sure that gets out to the community? So anybody who's going to be impacted by this is listening and could see that presentation, like there to be a little,
That's important.
Oh yeah. And then maybe Dawn, your presentation could be on the website.
Yeah.
Yeah. we
That would
can
be
include
great. That's a really good idea.
Maybe a letter to everybody that lives on, that
Oh,
has an
yeah.
address on land.
Yeah, that's a
Okay.
great
We
idea.
can do
or a
that.
separate email that goes out, like something. We have
We can
ways
do
to
that.
notify.
And then when we, start talking to people, because all people have individual trees and architectural features on their property, and I think we want to be sensitive to that. Maybe work with them as much as we can.
Right.
So I think those letters and kind of engaging with people are important.
Yeah, we could put out a letter to Landon. That's a great idea.
On just another topic, we had talked about the sewer project on, the new sewer project.
Belgrave?
Belgrade?
Belgrave, yeah, and when we're
We
gonna
sent,
notify those residents, have
Yes.
anything gone out to them?
Belgrave, did we send the Belgrave one yet?
No, we sent the 2A project. Oh, we have not. We have
No,
not.
we
We just
in
got
fact, I
our.
talked to one of the residents about the letter that we are sending out. Will be pretty shortly. We're not going to have our meeting with them probably until later. So,
I don't know if
yeah, we're gonna talk.
I don't know if we have the contract yet back from regional.
Yeah.
So I think we wanted to have that in hand before we.
Yeah, I agree.
Has the timing adjusted when you're anticipating that one, or?
I still think it's a 2025 project. Yeah.
But we don't know which part, just like just like Shaker, we kind of got pushed a little.
Yeah, I would, sometime in 25.
It's on them, yeah. Gotcha.
All righty. Well, thank you, Council. Thank you, Don, for a very nice presentation.
It's good.
Thanks, Don.
Yeah, thanks, Don.
All right, next we're going to move to, Mr. Lemay has drafted a new ordinance to amend section 122002. And I'll let, since it's his ordinance that he's promoting, I'll let him introduce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is new ordinance, different words, same result. As I explained before, my chief concern is for the planning commission reviewing major things that could have a broader impact on Pepper Pike. I still think it appropriate that council have a chance to review those. What I'd like to do is, you all have a red line and walk the red line through. Unfortunately, the method of accomplishing it in this ordinance takes a lot more words than the last ordinance. But I think it's very, very flexible on how we can do this to make it broad or narrow as council sees fit to adjust what it wants to review and what kind of matters that the planning commission decides on comes to here. So let me start with, first is, this is only where the planning commission is granting a use or a variance or a conditional use permit or a variance. So it's not routine matters, it's when they're granting a variance to our code because of a special situation. And so I direct you to the first two paragraphs, paragraph A and paragraph B is, the first part of that is just some cleanup drafting, making words be consistent and how they're used. The key paragraph is paragraph C, and I want to walk you through that so you can get how the mechanics of this work. So paragraph C starts with a very broad sentence that says, nothing the planning commission does, no action or decision in terms of the grant of a permit, variance, or exception or conditional use shall be effective until reviewed by council. So if you stop that paragraph there, every variance granted by the commission would come to council, which was not my intent because many of them are very routine. They have a very narrow impact and they're appropriate. I was more focused on larger projects, particularly commercial projects, where the impact on the community in terms of traffic or tree cutting or noise or light or all those kind of things may have a much broader impact on the community. So that paragraph C starts with a very broad, everything comes. And then let me focus you on the sentence starting with number 1 in the third line. It says that broad right shall not apply, and it doesn't apply to the grant or permit of an area variance or exception in furtherance of the construction of a new or modification of an existing single-family home or an accessory building to a single-family dwelling in a UN district. Now, I understand in looking at what the commission does, that exception swallows the rule almost in probably 95% of what the commission does, therefore, is outside of council's review. So if you're building a single family home and there's a variance to it, that doesn't come to council, a use variance. An area variance, not a use variance. If it's a use variance, you want to turn your house into a tattoo parlor, that's a use variance, that still comes to council. So any use variance comes to council, but an area variance, so you need a little height or you need a little encroachment on one side, those type of things that are kind of routine, single-family residential variances, which is most of what the commission does, would not come to council. That would stay. My thrust of this is really larger developments where they're going to develop one of the golf courses or develop the Ursuline property to put condos there, something like that, with a chance of construction impact, tree cutting impact, noise, light, disturbance on the residential community is at risk. So if one of those comes before the commission and is approved, if it's denied, we don't see it. But if it's approved, those larger impact projects would come up for approval, review and approval by council. So that's what that paragraph does. I'm sorry it took so many words to do this, but that's what it takes to get this right. And then it goes through the process. Paragraph D is how that process would work. We would review on a fixed record. There wouldn't be a new record. So the same record comes up to council. So there's not a new record. So we look at the record, we look at the decision of the commission. And if an interested party wants to make a written statement in support of the variance that was granted at the commission, they can do so. All that would be reviewed by council. I'd expect, looking back at what the planning commission does, this would happen a handful of times a year, a very small handful, because most of what the commission does is single family residential area variances, not use variances.
Jim,
So that's the mechanics of this, and I'm open to your question.
just let's clarify for the public what happened to 2023-18, because they might be a little confused why this is here now.
Yeah, this is a different, the mayor vetoed the last attempt to this. And so we're back with a different way of doing this. From a legal perspective, Mr. Byron is satisfied that it doesn't create any legal issues. He and I agreed to disagree on the legal issues on the last one. Lawyers often do that. But this is a way to accomplish the same result in terms of big projects. Having council have a chance to review the larger projects that could have a bigger impact on our community.
Is this a good time to hear from Mr. Byron about how you feel this fits in with your concerns?
Yeah, you may remember my previous concerns were that there was no basis on which anybody would know what decision of the Planning Commission could be summoned, and it presents a due process concern and an equal protection concern. This eliminates that. So this creates classes of judgments that would come up, and I agree that the majority of the work of the Planning Commission in terms of single-family residential activity, it excludes that. And then, of course, the appeals are still available to whomever wants to take an appeal, any interested party. So I think this solves my concerns from what the previous ordinance did.
So you are comfortable with this?
Yeah, I would like to see, and this is an existing problem in our code, and this is an opportunity to correct it. We could add a standard of review here such that basically we could incorporate that council does the same thing that the court's going to be looking at. You determine if there's sufficient evidence in the record, if it's arbitrary, capricious, or unreasonable, if it's unconstitutional. So basically to put the same standard that the court of common pleas would be looking on an appeal. People will say that if you put whether something's unconstitutional or not, you don't have the authority to adjudicate that because you're not a court. So I'd leave that one out, but you can certainly look at the evidence or any other legal concerns of a decision so that so the court knows what you're looking at.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you don't need to do that, and the current code doesn't have that.
And what I end up doing is telling everybody what the standard is.
Yeah.
So if you had it in the code, everybody would know rather than waiting for me to answer.
And that standard, the breadth of that standard is capacious in terms of.
Well, you're looking at the facts and you're looking at the law and you're looking at the application of the facts of the law. So it covers the waterfront.
Are there other places in our existing ordinances where that same thing would apply? Because, for example, I noticed that in our subdivision section, for example, this process of council review is set out there, and council can review a planning commission decision, but there's no standard as to what.
Right.
It just says council can turn it down if they want.
Yeah, remember that when council's doing a subdivision, and particularly when it's dedicating streets, it is accepting property, real estate for city ownership when you dedicate a street. And that carries with it a obligation to maintain. So the appropriate development of a municipality is within the sound discretion of council, and that's not an administrative action. That's not applying the law to the facts of the case. It is looking at the development of the city and seeing if this is consistent with what.
The same also exists in our townhouse section, where that wouldn't be an issue.
Right.
So it would be, again, council just making a decision. So I guess my question is, since there's two other areas where zoning is subject to review by council in our current code, would we not have to put that provision in those as a matter of just consistency?
Well, the subdivision is not an administrative action.
Townhouse would be, though.
Townhouse would be, and I think we're pretty much built out in that district, except maybe on the west side.
Except for the west
side of Brainerd.
Yeah.
Along Cedar.
We apply that standard. I mean, I have to go back and look at it.
Yeah.
But when I'm advising a municipal body that's acting in an administrative capacity, I'm always saying, this is what the court's going to look at if it
Mhm.
goes up. You have to have reasons for your decision in applying the rules
Right.
to the situation. So
All right, let me, this is the first
Think about it.
I just,
you just came up with this one, Steve, so.
no, exactly right. And I didn't mean it as a criticism.
Well, no,
That standard is not in our code and it could be improved.
I want to think about it. I'm open to that, though, actually. Let me raise other issues with council in, again, my number one in parentheses, that sentence. When Steve and I talked about this last time, I only had single-family dwelling in there. And he made the note about, well, how about accessory buildings to a single-family dwelling? So this would be the shed where you put your tractor and I guess, and so he raised the point is, well, do you want all of the sheds to come to council? And I thought about it and said, probably not. So I put that in brackets, but I put it in brackets for council to think about.
But these are variances.
And can I-
Let me finish.
Building,
So
correct?
I only put it in brackets because I just want to emphasize council the flexibility of this. If there's some other type of variance, even at a single family home, that you want to review, we can build that in here. So it's infinitely flexible about dialing it up or dialing it down. And even as time passes and we live with this and we decide, well, you know, there is one thing I'd like to bring up to council, we could amend this to make that. So it's very flexible as long as it's specified in here how we could do that. At this point, I'm inclined to include the accessory buildings because I don't want someone's shed, every shed in the city coming up to council. I just,
Can I speak to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I think we're talking about, I'm trying to recall, I've been on planning and zoning for a little over 2 years now. I don't think we've had a shed in these 2 years come as a variance.
okay.
So just to, now those go to ARB and they are reviewed there. I suppose in theory they could get appealed up to planning and zoning.
Zoning.
We've had accessory buildings.
Like what? Can you give an example?
So, yeah, that's a good example. So it depends sometimes on the parcel of land, how they're treated. So an accessory building could be a shed, although somehow that seems to always get worked out. And basically there's, in our ordinance, there's rules about where the shed could be and what it has to look like. Those seem to have always gotten worked through. They've never come to us. The things that have come to us are usually like a secondary garage that could be pretty large. There was a pavilion, like sort of an outdoor pavilion. Now, these were all, by the way, approved. So, and they weren't necessarily controversial because they were on larger parcels of land. So we have some larger parcels and it was appropriate. We did have one that had a number of issues. That it would have been really hard. I could go into detail why they would have, probably 4 things that they would have needed variances for. And so that's the only, I think that's the only one I could recall. I'm trying to go back and think that we've turned down. It's pretty rare. And as far as a use variance,
I don't remember any.
well, there was one. I think there was
use?
one with somebody who wanted to make things and, manufacture things. I think we.
The
Yeah.
weapon one.
I forgot the gun. All variances get reviewed, so you know.
But I forgot the gun.
So that was maybe not, is pretty out of the scope of what we usually have happening
Yeah.
in people's houses. So it was, well, any kind of manufacturing, would have been, is out of
Right.
the scope. I think it was. So I think these would be pretty rare, even if we included accessory buildings. I mean, I don't have necessarily a strong feeling. I think they are pretty rare. And I do think the high value is in these big parcels that right now we have nothing to contemplate. Maybe in 5 years or even 10 years, they don't. But we do have these big parcels right even in the middle of our city, right? We have 2 country clubs. I mean, we don't
Ursuline.
know. We have Ursuline, we have, and there's probably a few other medium-sized
Right.
parcels that I'm not even contemplating. So that's the big value. But the other things I don't think are a big problem, I guess is what I would say, because we don't really have that much. Mostly what we see, I would tell you, and it is something that I have a concern about. I don't know if this is the right place to address it or not. I would like to discuss it with council at some point is we have people looking for garage variances, bigger garages, orientation of the garage. So we have a non-front facing garage. That's one. There is maybe concern in some of our older neighborhoods where we're seeing more tear downs with those kind of variances related to the house. And then the other one, which I don't even know if it falls really exactly in this category, but I'll just throw it out there because the issue of tree preservation. So the first two are more variances. The tree preservation maybe is more of an enforcement issue.
Mm.
And I know, you know, the mayor and I have talked about that. It's a challenge because what happens in that case, which we can get to at a different time, is people take down the trees, you know, and then what do you do without, you know? So, but the variances mostly come in the form of, I would say, garages, fences. You might have seen some sheds over the years, but not in recent time. Those are really, it's really garages, fences, riparian we can't really do much with, which is the water issue, you know.
The, I don't want to interrupt you.
No, go ahead, it's fine.
I agree with you. I think garages, the size of garages, and something before you guys were on, we had dealt with at council at the beginning about that we need, because it is often in terms of a variance, and maybe so long as the planning commission remains comfortable and has some confidence that it does have, I think it's always exercised good discretion, basically. No, sometimes there's a call back and forth,
Yeah.
but usually, you know, it's thoughtful. It's considered.
Oh,
It's not just some casual, oh yeah, go build a big garage. It's never that. I think there should be in our future another discussion about the size of a garage proportionally to the size of the house and the lot. Because, you know, sometimes, and it's, right now it's just restricted to, what is it, 1,000 square feet, which doesn't make sense always in the context of our big houses on a big lot. You know, why, it's basically, it's not always almost proportional to the size of the house. So I think planning commission has used good discretion in all of the situations that I think of. I agree. I don't remember shed per se variances. I don't remember those. What I do remember are some setback issues. And that was a question I had here in my notes. Because just the way this is described so far as language, that variances regarding the modification of the seems more structure oriented.
Yeah,
The variances.
Yeah.
And sometimes these U1 variances deal with someone has to cheat 1.5 feet or a couple of feet beyond a setback issue. I don't think council wants to be
that wouldn't be included.
hearing these.
That's an area.
The
of-
way it's written, you think that's an area?
Because it says in furtherance of the construction or the modification of a single family home. So
Okay,
that,
so long as you're interpreting it.
Yeah,
I
that-
just want to be clear
yeah. No,
that
that-
those things happen, and I don't want to kick those things up to council.
No,
Not a lot. I remember we had one on a corner lot. Corner lots sometimes pose a problem because of the setbacks. I
Right,
know we had one off of Lander that was like 2 years ago. Trying to remember.
the
But
corner things.
Yeah, the corner lots sometimes, and usually the garages, the sides of the garages haven't been a big problem. It's usually 100 feet when we have to do with it. My bigger concern sometimes is the orientation of the garage, so the front facing garage issue. And it's something to talk about. My concern has to do with the application of the variance statute. So the variance statute gives criteria
seven, yeah.
for the variance, you know, that it's not wouldn't be a similar property within the zoning district, that the problem isn't created by the person or probably the previous owner, that, you know, so something that they built and now they want something else. You know, I can't say, my example would be that I can't say, well, I have a really nice deck behind my house and I have a drop off a little bit, so I want to build out the side of my house because I want a first floor master. And I can't just do that and encroach like right upon the property line. You can't just do that. I could have done it behind my house, you know, I just don't want to get, I like my deck, it's pretty, right? So I sometimes worry about the interpretation of practical difficulty as sort of a catch-all that obliterates the other items. And I don't know if there's a way that we could look at that ordinance more tightly, maybe clean it up so that the practical difficulty, you know, it feels to me like a catch-all.
So its meaning is spelled out, is that what you're?
Yeah, maybe the practical difficulty is spelled out, so we have a clarification, because what I think, sometimes I feel, and rare occasion is happening, is that you have these really good-hearted people who come and want something, and I'm planning and zoning, we're in a challenging position where, you know, how do you interpret the variance ordinance? It's pretty structured. And I don't know if we need to go point by point and almost do as findings. I know some other cities, I've talked to a few people, like Moreland Hills does that. I think their law director does it, not to give you another extra thing, but it does findings on point by point. But it's just something to think about, because while this is big picture, I see a not enforcing of our zoning ordinances. And by the way, we could change our zoning ordinances if we don't like them, but we're assuming that we like them. We actually probably didn't put them in place. They've been put in place by previous councils, most of them. And if you don't enforce it, it's one thing that maybe isn't right, and then it's another garage, then it's another lot line. And pretty soon you could really make a significant impact, you know, when you have 20, 30 properties, you know, you change the look of the community. And it's fair to say we don't like those ordinances, but I think that should be an active decision to say we don't like the ordinances, we should change it about any ordinance. I don't think we should be ignoring that maybe we're not holding tight to the ordinances. It's just an observation of mine, and I think it's something that council should maybe, you know, take notice of.
Can I ask,
Sure.
in your tenure there, are there cases that come to mind that you would have seen come up, do you think would have come up to council? Like, do you have any examples?
Well, and the question is, should it come up to council, or is there a better way to get at it?
Right.
Yeah, there are a couple. There was a front-facing garage that I felt like didn't meet the, and that's my personal view, didn't meet the requirements promulgated under the ordinance for variance. And by the way, our list, I've looked at a bunch. I've looked at Shaker, Moreland, and Chagrin. Everybody has a pretty similar list of how you get a variance. It must be some template. But yeah, so that
From a
would,
Supreme Court decision.
Supreme Court.
Yeah.
They vary a little though, so people maybe play with it a little.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So that garage was approved, and you think that that could have potentially come up to council for review?
Yeah, and the
Okay.
question is, should it, or is there a better way to get at it?
Yeah.
Let's see, there was another, there have been a few others. Well, one, we overturned something that ABR did. I wasn't sure. That's a little different question. And I have a different suggestion for that, which is just sort of along with what Steve did, some sort of framework for findings, which I think we're missing. That's in the appeal process. That's probably simple, but, and I think there was one other one that I would tell you, you know, but it's pretty rare. In 2 years, I would say there are maybe 2 or 3 that I personally thought, ooh, I don't know, that's what council intended. So yeah, it would be it's narrow, but you know, does it belong here or not? I'm not sure. I just think that we should look at that and understand, you know, and then, you know, we can talk about the tree preservation issue later.
And I think that, and I'm trying to reflect back on a couple of these examples that Melanie recalled. And, you know, I think the underlying question is, okay, there was, you know, Melanie felt one way about something, and I think the rest of the commission felt another way. Okay. I'm not saying that Melanie was, you know, doing anything but what she thought was appropriate in the way she voted. I don't think the rest of the commission did anything other than what they felt was appropriate in the way they voted.
Certainly, yes.
The question becomes, just because there is any disagreement on the commission, does that mean that needs to spring forward to the council. And I actually don't think so, because I think that's why we have a planning commission to, it doesn't, that you have a vote and, sometimes, like Melanie has come up with a solution to a house design, I remember, or the orientation that frankly persuaded everyone else to, oh yeah, and it persuaded the builder. Yeah, let's do it that way. And we now have a very successful house at the corner of Southwood and Lander. So we all don't always see things the same way, is what I'm saying, when we go in or at the conclusion. So my point is, because the commission, which has a lot of experience on it so far as reviewing these things, if it doesn't necessarily unanimously agree on something, I don't think that should be a trigger that it automatically then goes up to the city council.
And that's actually what
I don't think so.
I'm to a certain degree, agreeing with you, or at least pondering that myself, whether, I don't know if it belongs here. I do think it maybe requires council's attention to double back and look at how the variance ordinance, which we have in place, is being applied. Because my issue wasn't, do I like it, do I not like it? I don't see that as my role. I see my role as looking at the list of things that fit the variance. I'm given the ordinance that some previous council people put in place out of, I think, their concern for our community. And I'm given a criteria, to assess whether it's applicable to the variance, whether a variance could be given. And I read the variance ordinance and I think, no, it can't. Whether I think these are nice people and maybe even have a nice project or whatever the reason, I just look at the ordinance and say, does it fit? Do any of the requirements, can I check the box? And I sometimes think that the people who I sit with, who are really wonderful people and thoughtful people, aren't going down that list and saying and assessing it that way. And we're using practical difficulty to basically say, if you have some vague idea, basically, I think at one point somebody said, well, practical difficulty, not you, could mean whatever you want it to mean. And I thought, oh no, that can't be what it is. And so basically, if you can say the words practical difficulty kind of amorphously, vaguely, the ordinance doesn't matter. And I know that's an exaggeration, but I would tell you that in these cases, I went through the list and I thought, no, it doesn't meet any of the criteria. And then we just said, oh, practical difficulty. And it's pretty rare, but I still worry about it. And I also think that the other thing that bothers me about it is it's inequitable. So someone shows up and they're a person who complains or, is very forceful in their approach, or maybe they even feel like, and that none of us would do it, but they feel like they know us and they're going to show up and appeal it. Someone else just sees that they can't do it and says, oh, I can't do it. I'm not going to. So this other person who has the belief, at least, that they can come here and petition us because of either who they are or because they can push us hard, they're getting treated differently than their neighbor next door who thought that they were supposed to follow what's in our ordinance. So that bothers me a lot, that people might be treated differently. And it might be just because somebody doesn't ask, but I'm a rule follower. And so I would probably think, oh, here's what it says. I can't have this. So that also bothers me. It feels very inequitable.
Well, that is I think you've described well your approach to variances.
Mm-hmm.
I think you reflected your position.
Mm-hmm.
You're what I would almost call a strict constructionist.
Well,
So
not
far,
in real life,
not
but-
trying to say that pejorative, but so far as your view as to here the thing.
I read the ordinance.
Right, right.
And I think I
And,
should apply the variance ordinance.
Right. And if council were to come to a point where it was reviewing variances, you're going to have to get that same sort of education about, well, when do you grant variances? I don't necessarily agree. I don't agree with Melanie's interpretation. She knows that. We've had this conversation. My view of variances is we have a zoning code that has a spirit as to what is it trying to accomplish? And is this variance consistent with the goal of the zoning code? To me, that is the lens that you look through the variance application and the question of, is there a practical difficulty? Is this fair? We're not going to adopt the variance that's just askew to the goal and what the zoning code is trying to accomplish. So that, coming at it from a little different direction, different people, you can come out with a different result. That doesn't mean that it comes up to council, though, in my view. So my question is similar to the one I had with the first iteration of an ordinance was, what is and I agree with Steve, I don't find this one, other than the standard of review, which I think is really important to be in there also. As a policy matter, what are we trying to accomplish here? I know, if something horrible goes off the rails, I understand the sort of generalized apprehension, but it doesn't seem that there's a real problem here we're trying to resolve. And that concerns me. Melanie mentioned, we have these large parcels in the future. Would we need this sort of thing then? I don't.
Yes.
I don't.
Yes is my answer.
But what,
And
what is this going to do?
And
for
not to
that?
have it.
What is this going to do for that?
It's going to do for that. It's going to come to council so that the elected representatives have a chance to weigh in on a major project that impacts our community.
Okay.
And I've seen other communities with these use ordinances. I think it's not that unusual. I spent some time sitting there because I'm a fun person reading some of these ordinances. And I think there are other communities who must have along
Many
the way
others.
Yeah.
had very similar concerns. So this is not a novel
Right.
approach at all.
The condition, and as I've told Jim, I can get comfortable pretty fast with the idea of the conditional use idea. That idea. The variance business, I don't know that, even in the commercial sphere, which you're trying to preserve here, what are these variances that we're talking about? We're still talking about, I'm trying to think of the examples of commercial variances that we've dealt with over the last few years, which are very few. Very few. Signs are
And lights.
And lights.
signs and lights. And the commission, though, really handles that pretty thoughtfully and well. We don't have wild signs.
But if we don't have this and a developer comes in and says, I'm going to put 300 condos on the back of Ursuline and there's some non-zoning amendment is required, it's a conditional use, for example.
You can't get
can't
to
do
a
that.
rezoning
The-
based on
There's a conditional use we just approved for the Ursuline property.
for the what?
Ursuline
No, it
property.
was an extension of a non-conforming.
Yeah, that was a different thing. It's
Yeah.
not a conditional use.
Yeah.
Although it's in the appeal chapter, we don't have conditional use permits in our code, except in the riparian ordinance.
Yeah.
That's the only place where you see conditional use
Didn't we
permits.
have a request for the one I mentioned earlier? The house, the
The where?
manufacturing?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
That was a conditional use. What was that?
Well, that was,
I mean, I know we-
they wanted a determination that that was an accessory use,
Oh,
a permitted accessory use.
okay.
And there was no evidence that that type of manufacturing was occurring traditionally, because it's an accessory use in our definitions says that it's customary within the community. And I don't think there are manufacturing plants
in
in,
people's houses.
not anymore. There used to be
Yeah, once. Well,
hundreds of years ago.
Can I ask about the, if it's denied, end of line. If it's approved, it can come up. I'm thinking, explain to me the logic of that, because I'm thinking of, say, there's a scenario where things have flipped on its head and a developer comes and wants to develop the vacant land, the country club has gone bust. And the planning commission says, no, we don't want that. but the community as a whole says, yeah, we do. But it's been rejected by the planning commission. There's no way to address it.
We could do that.
Well, the
What
community
I'm,
would
what
have
I'm,
the.
what I'm, what we're preserving the status quo
Mhm.
here by doing this. And so if there's not going to be an impact on the community, I was really tempted to get
I
this
gotcha. Okay.
as narrow as possible
Yeah,
for big projects where the community could be impacted.
yeah, okay, that makes sense.
But we don't have if something desires to be, like right now, the country clubs are in a U2 area, institutional. Planning commission does not have the discretion simply to say, no, we don't like that. It has to be within the zoning. If they want to construct residential housing in a U2 area, they would have to get a zoning change by referendum in order to construct those homes. That's not up to the planning commission at all.
But I think there is, and that's why I'm saying I'm not sure that the variances need to come up to council, although I could see a way that it would work. It would be rare. But I do think there's a tremendous amount of discretion in planning and zoning. And these are people who are appointed and do it with goodwill and integrity. However, they're not elected, they're not responsive to the community. So I do like the idea, especially for these large parcels, of at least if they grant a conditional use or something that we're not anticipating, that it could come to council because we are ultimately responsible. So I think that's where it plays in. And just because they're doing it with goodwill doesn't mean that, and working hard at it, and doesn't mean that we shouldn't take a look at something so important as Jim, I think, is trying to convey.
And
I
guess
kind of
my-
like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I wanted to address what you had said, Mayor. You say you don't see the problem that this is solving, right? That we don't have a problem. I guess my question to you would be, what is the downside of having this in case it's necessary?
So long as unnecessary things aren't coming up to council and clogging it.
No.
I'm not standing in my chair screaming.
And under this
I'm just
drafting.
wondering
Yeah.
why we're doing it, that's all.
Yeah. And under this drafting, it'd be a rare case that comes to council because
Yeah.
there's not many big commercial projects going. There still could be. The golf course failed for something like that. And it didn't require zoning, so it's going to
So
be.
going back to the commercial area, because I understand now, okay, basically you won, you're carving out of this altogether, basically.
Right.
Other than if the use itself is going to change.
Right.
In the commercial area, do we want to have, Jewish Family Service wanted a variance regarding parking lot, something about their parking. I can't remember exactly what.
I don't know a way.
I don't think council wants to hear that.
I don't know a way to pick those out.
Right.
There's just, we could draft for days. Saying, and so having all of them come up, which will mean one or two a year, based on
It's
history.
pretty rare.
So
Very
just
rare.
take out the requirement that a majority of council has to want to see it.
No, this is automatic.
Automatic, okay.
It's automatic.
And
For
it has
those
to be
little
that way,
slice of little.
Yeah, okay.
Even the number of variances, and I'm not saying we should include them, it's not that many. I mean,
No, it's not.
it's not that many. There are a lot of things that are kind of worked out in ARB that never come to planning and zoning. So there might be a back and forth, and people might think, when they did their project years ago, oh, no, you didn't come to planning and zoning. You just worked through whatever challenges the code had with ARB or with the building department. So it's pretty rare. I mean.
Right. The area variance is the only time we see the shed. If they need that setback issue.
Yeah.
I think that's the only time
And
we see
just
the
to
shed.
circle back, what I'm saying is that I think council needs to look at to clarify is, I don't know if it necessarily needs to be here. I mean, it would make me feel a little better because what I'm seeing, and I don't think I'm in the real world, I'm not a strict constructionist. I just think that this is a small community, we have ordinances. And I see people going beyond what the ordinances says we can do. And on rare occasion, and it's compelling because these are nice people who are asking for it. And I think council needs to be aware that, that is happening, and maybe it's problematic because I see it as kind of very transformative over a period of time. So if we have an ordinance that says a garage can't face forward and one person wants it, but they don't really fit all the criteria, but we just say practical difficulty, and another one, you could say, well, I don't care. I think front facing garages are great. I don't know why the ordinance is there. That's not the point. The point is that, the ordinance wasn't being applied. That's the point. You can change the ordinance if you don't like it.
Mayor.
So you're saying we should articulate better
Or Jim.
when we grant them.
Yeah, and maybe we should make sure we go through the criteria and really understand what practical difficulty is, because I think there are definitions in the law that practical difficulty isn't something that a personal difficulty, like for example, if my mom is sick and I want to have something that's not, it's a personal difficulty, it's not a practical difficulty as defined under the case law. So, making sure everyone understands the criteria and that we go through them in a kind of business-like way, because we don't really do that. Almost like a finding. I don't know. That's my belief. I think it would be more meticulous.
Jim.
Tony.
Sorry, Tony, I'm talking.
That's okay. I think we're talking about two different subjects.
We are.
Yeah, that's a
And
different topic.
And I,
It is.
and
it is.
I have sympathy for what Melanie's saying. I think we should address that separately
Mhm.
at another time.
I agree.
I think I like having this safeguard for council to look at what could be, and I don't know, the 10 or 12 years I've been on council might have come up 2 or 3 times. And to have this safeguard to protect the community, I think is a good thing. And that we should, I don't know if this is a first reading or whatever, but since the law director and the mayor seem to be comfortable with this version of doing the same thing as we wanted to have done, that we should, go ahead and support this ordinance and address Melanie's concerns maybe at
And I'm very supportive of that.
a later point.
Yeah.
I just think it's really a good thing to have this safeguard
Okay.
for council to
Yeah,
protect.
I
the
think
community.
these are policy choices that you're talking about here more so. And so a lot of my concerns, I may not agree with every variation of the theme here, but these are policy choices and that's what you guys do. So I think we should probably take a look at the standard
Yeah.
review stuff. and-
Steve, do you have examples of other ordinances in other communities where I just want to see the words. What does it say exactly? Does it put the full verbiage in that says, or does it just reference the Supreme Court case or what?
Well,
Or reference the statute?
you will find that our ordinance that deals with findings by the planning commission is almost verbatim from what's called the Duncan case, Duncan versus Middlefield.
Mm.
And that lays out, and the Supreme Court imported New York variance law and said, this is how Ohio is going to do it. So much for home rule, right? So, and it's,
What section
it
is
is, in our code, it is section 1262.03D. And it lists 12 factors that you're supposed to look at, guaranteing that you could have this factor applicable and this factor isn't applicable. It is maximum flexibility for a community to make an interpretation, as the mayor is saying, is the harm that's intended to be avoided by the strict application of the ordinance applicable in this case. I give the classic example of a property that's been preserved between 2 parcels, and it's got a conservation easement on it, never going to be built on. Well, if somebody comes in and says, I'd like to have a variance all the way to my sideline, and I'm still going to be 200 feet from my neighbor because there's a lot that's preserved in between. Why would you apply? Why would you apply whatever the setback is in that community? It doesn't make any sense because the purpose of the setback is to keep distances between homes. It's not chiseled in stone. It's not, this is the rule and we must apply it. unless you can't. Well, that's not true. You're trying to avoid unconstitutional applications of the code where you're not advancing the health, safety, and welfare of the community, which is the underlying standard. So, I have given a lot of thought to this, and I know what courts are going to be looking at.
Yeah.
And I try to advise the planning commission based on that. That's a different issue than what comes to this, what comes to council. I would incorporate the language from 2506.04.
That language, yeah.
Except for the part that says unconstitutional, because the Ohio Supreme Court says that local governments can't adjudicate constitutional issues.
So either right, so take the sub part of that, except for that phrasing, and just drop that in here is what you would recommend.
Yep.
And is that standard in what we see in other
Let me-
communities' ordinances? Is that pretty much the?
What standard is what your, the findings, what's in D, that is standard in communities where you have a laundry list of things that the commission is supposed to look at. And people will judge these things different. Is the variance substantial? Might be, might not be, depending on the context.
Stephen, do you have other, again, just to that same point, do you have other communities you've worked in where that's the method they do? They quote 2506 is that the go-to?
Well, for if you're going to have appellate review, that's what I would recommend.
Okay.
If you're the planning commission is vested with the authority to grant variances, you have the language, that's the state of the art language that you have in your code already.
Well, in Part E, we already referenced 2506.
Right.
Giving them, just make it clear it's the final decision, you can go 2506. So we could just, I'll look at that language that you're talking about because it's built into the statute. And it basically says to overturn it, the court must find arbitrary.
Yeah. I would put the standard in D at the end, after review, council may by majority vote amend, modify, et cetera, upon a determination that the decision of the commission is not supported by the evidence or otherwise violates the code.
Could I make a bold suggestion that we allow the law director to draft the language of what we're
I'll
talking
look at
about
it
here?
and decide whether it.
And then
should go
you
there.
council decide if it's
I'll
the
look at
right
it.
language.
Happy to
Just a
look at it.
thought.
I have a question. Tony, you mentioned there was like a couple instances in the past that maybe this might have been useful for. What were those instances, or do we want to expand on that or not, or
Well,
was that in the past? Or?
all I was trying to make the point is that this is going to be a rare occasion that we have to use this clause. And I was thinking of Beach Brook and some of the things that have happened at Ursuline. Those are the kinds of large properties where these kinds of issues could come up. And I'm not saying that we would have been engaged in any of those, but those are the issues that have come up over the 10 or 12 years. And there have only been 3 or 4 of them. So, one every 3 years, this is not going to be a burden on council to address this. And it's just a great safeguard for us to protect the community.
So how do we move it forward?
Well, just wait a second. Steve, I've read dozens of these council review statutes. I've never seen a standard of review in the council review statutes among 24 communities.
Okay.
So I don't think I want to be bound to the appellate review standard as opposed to a de novo standard on the record. On the record. So we have a policy disagreement on how it was interpreted, why the variance was permitted. Council shouldn't have to find the decision was arbitrary by the planning commission. That's beyond what I anticipate here. And I don't think we're bound to do that.
No, you're not bound to do it.
Right. Okay. Because I think this is going to be rare, but if it comes up, it's a policy question of, is the use permit that was granted consistent with the character and nature of Pepper Pike? This example where he wanted a use permit to manufacture weapons in his basement. Now, if the commission had granted that, I don't want to have to go to a finding that says, oh, we have to find them arbitrary and capricious before I can overturn that. That's too big a burden on council. We're making a policy decision about what's right for the community as the elected officials. And if the commission would have had to approve that, and this council said, well, I just think that's just wrong, plain wrong. I don't want to be bound to have to make a finding that the commission was arbitrary.
Well, let's flip it around, and let's say somebody wanted to do something, put a stable in the backyard or something like that, and on larger lots of property, the stables are in existence in the city. If the evidence came in to say there are large lots that have stables on them, and the planning commission made the decision to allow the usage, and I think it's permitted by the code, set that aside. My concern is that council would say, no, we don't want to recognize the facts that were before the planning commission regarding the application of the code to a specific instance. That's just my concern, is that if you don't have a standard that directs council to look back at what the record says, there could be action taken that's not based on the evidence.
Well, yeah, but I don't want to have to have a finding, because that denudes, that takes away the authority of council to make important policy judgments about what's right for the city.
No. When you're doing administrative action, you're applying a code provision to a specific instance. The policy decision has already been made.
I'm using policy in a different sense than the technical legal meaning that you just referenced. I'm using a decision in terms of, is weapons manufacturing in basements Pepper Pike appropriate for our city?
Well, and again, the commission made that decision, and
They did, but if they'd gone the
It could have come out differently.
if they came out differently,
We
I don't want to be
very-
limited to finding them arbitrary.
We weren't.
well, I think if they had come out and said that, you could make a determination that that's an arbitrary decision based on the fact that there is no evidence. There was no evidence before the commission, which would indicate that that's an appropriate
To me,
use
that-
in the village.
So couldn't we have this
City.
conversation with our legal counsel at that time, as opposed to
Sure.
putting it in
We would,
now? We
course
would
we would.
always do that.
always.
I think it's telling that all the examples being used for the justification of this are like really extreme. And so that's what I'm trying to get a sense of. You're saying, oh, this has only come up a handful of times. And, it doesn't sound like there's been even a case where, even if they had something come up, that council would have necessarily overturned it. And so that's what I'm struggling with is, yes, I understand, Scott, I get your point. Wouldn't you rather sort of have this than not? But I am more inclined to just be like, we just don't need to give council power just for the heck of it, just as an option
I
to
don't-
use somewhere
yeah.
down the road. So
I-
that's what I'm struggling with.
No, and I don't think it's just for the heck of it. And I guess I brought up that other issue for two reasons. One, because I think it's an issue we should look at, although I could see looking at it separately, the issue of these smaller variances. The other one, because I truly believe that, and I urge council to closely look at the variance ordinance. And I'm happy to, go over the facts as applied with you. I think council would be very surprised at the interpretation. And that's a small one-off thing that happened with a particular house. But in theory, I think council would feel that the application, it could happen on a grander scale in one of these situations. That's an example where I think council would say, wait a second, that's not what our ordinance was intended to mean. We thought we made a very clear criteria of variances, and yet the result was very different. And so I think it is very feasible that this could happen if the situation in one of these big properties, which just doesn't happen very often, presented itself. And this gives us that protection in something that's so high value. We sit here and talk about things like Gates Mills Trail and how important that is to the core of our community. Well, these things are just as high value and just as equally important. And I think that
Telling for me is, I've read dozens and dozens of cities that have this kind of review.
Mhm.
Some cities, every variance comes up to council. Chagrin Falls is that way now, or they guess it used to be that way, and now they have a different method. But dozens of cities have that, where this comes up, and there's no standard review in any of them that I've read, dozens of them. That just, so council is taking upon itself to look at what the planning commission does and asking the bigger question is this right for our city? Which is more than just say, was their decision arbitrary? And I don't think this is going to happen often, but it's like, I've had fire insurance on my house for 40 years. I've never used it. I guess it was a waste of money. But when you need it, you really need it.
Well, and Melanie, I could tell you, I was on planning and zoning for many years before I was on council. And I saw kind of the same thing that you're talking about, where you would see it applied somewhere. And then 2 years later, when you have maybe a different makeup, that you get a different result. And it can't be both. So to have some oversight, and Jackie, I appreciate what you're saying. Is there a problem? Do we need to have something for that problem? But I guess my sense of the questions that I asked the mayor, and is there a downside to having this? And I'm not sure anybody's articulated a downside to me yet.
And if there's not a downside to your point, if it just sits there and does nothing in 10 years while we wasted an hour of our time talking about it, or a few hours, and good for us that we didn't have to worry about it.
Well, and it was important to me to get the law director's opinion and basically sign off on this and the changes that were made to make it, Steve, what you would, I guess, would consider this is okay the way it is now.
Of course.
I was uncomfortable when you weren't okay with it. It was to me anyway. So I'm glad that the work has been done to get it to that state.
All right.
All right, well, I would like to just go ahead and enact next week. I'll clean up. I'm going to take out the brackets on accessory building, so that stays not coming up to council. And I think no one's come up with any other examples that, minor stuff that should not come up to council. I think it's pretty fine here, and it'll be rare when it comes up to council because it's so narrow and it's just commercial and tends to be larger projects, so.
You've just guaranteed we're going to have a dozen of these in the next 6 months.
Well, then won't we be glad?
All right, we will move on then. Next, we have a piece of legislation that Mr. Gentili has drafted. And ordinance 2024-04 has been marked. I will turn to Mr. Gentili for his introduction of his legislation.
Well, this legislation establishes a charter review commission. The city has never had a charter review since it was originally adopted in November of 1966. And there's been a lot of talk about charter reviews, especially during the recent campaign for mayor and for council. And I thought that one of the things that I promised that I would do would try to push for a charter review, and this is what I'm doing here. I've asked Melanie if she would be willing to co-chair with me on this, and there's a reason for that, 2 reasons for that actually. We're both sort of lawyers, and so we can read the charter maybe a little better than some. And the other reason is that we have both been involved in other local governmental entities than Pepper Pike. So we have a view from Melanie with the school board, myself with Hunting Valley over a number of years. Would like to have a third member of council on the commission if there's anyone who wants to join. We also thought that there should be 11 residents, 8 residents who are not on council, who can be nominated by the mayor or any member of council. And they should express an interest in serving on the commission, have some relevant experience and knowledge, and express a commitment to Pepper Pike. We don't want somebody who's building a house in Hunting Valley next year and wants to be on this commission. I'm gonna change the date in section 4 from August 2, 2024. I didn't think that through. We need actually to be done by June 12th if we're gonna try and get it on the ballot in November. I know that that's maybe compressing the time a little, but if we want to get it on the ballot in November, I think we have to have 3. I'm providing for 3 readings in June and July, so that we have it approved, ready to go to the election board by August, whatever, 6th.
I don't want to dissuade you from doing that, but you do have a little more time. The Constitution provides that charter amendments can be submitted to the Board of Elections up to not later than 60 days before the election. However, they will hate you if you do that, because the federal voting laws require notice to be mailed out and that sort of thing. And so I think I've talked to Brent, who's the guy down that runs the candidates and issues. He's a great guy. If he knows that we are going to be bringing him an election issue at the July meeting, or even at an August meeting, again, that'd be the 3rd week of August. I haven't looked at the calendar. That would be probably okay. I would say, you could try to keep it to August 2nd. I think that's a fair target.
I'd like to put the initial target at June 12th. If we do have some more time, then we can take it under what you're saying.
Mhm.
But this would give us the ability to have 3 readings, 1 in late June, 2 in July, and then be there 90 days before.
So should we write the ordinance? Should we write the ordinance with more time, but yet give ourselves a calendar?
Well, I think
Less
I think I
time?
like having the pressure, and that we could change it if we need to. But I think we could get done in 3 months. We have March, April, May, and part of June. So I think we can get it done.
So what's the proposed date?
Attorney,
So it'd be June 12th.
in your mind's eye, is this looking at the entire charter, or are there certain parts of it that?
The entire charter.
The entire
The
charter.
entire charter, yes. And I have developed a thought about how to approach this, where we take many of the charters around and assemble them into kind of worksheets, so we could look at what other charters say and what our charter says.
From other communities.
Right, from
Yeah.
other communities, other communities that are nearby that are similar to ours. And the other thing that I need to do is to have a budget, because they're going to need some secretarial help, some administrative help on this. And I think last year we used $3,000 council did for mailing for the town halls.
Around there.
Around there.
300,
Then make it 4,000. And then the other thing I would like to do is to ask that if we could try to do this in 2 readings, tonight being the first reading. Because I'd like to be able to get started with the process and the administrative help that I need. Let's see,
Question.
today's the 21st, the 28th, it'd be, get started in early March.
Well, you would still, what would you expect the process to be for the appointing of residents?
Well, we're gonna have to send out, I would send out emails from the email list, and then try to cross-reference that and mail to anybody that isn't on the email list.
Any magic to 11 members?
I don't think magic, no.
Okay.
Did
I
you,
just-
you saw?
I just
it
caution
in
you
our
having-
ordinance?
8 is a big number and 11 is a big committee.
Well, I,
There's going to be a lot of herding cats.
They could
well,
divide the work.
the way
though.
I had envisioned this would be, we'd have subcommittees to look at various
I see.
areas.
I see.
And so the committees would either be 3 or
Hmm.
4. And so that, in order to get it done,
Yeah.
we wouldn't want everybody to look at everything. We'd bring everything back together after people came up with, or if the subcommittees made their recommendations. And I don't know if I need to have all that process in the ordinance, but I don't think so.
And some of these things might be even just seemingly small, but some of the language, so, you know, like if you look at it, that refers to, you know, proceedings of council are recorded in a journal, the councilman, it always says councilman instead of council
So much
person.
for that.
I mean, there are a lot of us here that aren't councilmen. So that would be a pretty simple cleanup, like, but that is consistent throughout a lot of it. And so I think as you go through it, if you read it, it's an interesting historical document. And I think we need to keep some of, you know, the history, we need to keep the history in it, but we also want to make sure that it's applicable to how we do business now.
Tony, I appreciate you drafting this and kind of propelling this forward. You know, when I read it, that we've never undergone a review since 1966, you know, that's older than me. So I think it's always, you know, I feel like
It's older than everybody but me.
no. I wasn't going to go there, but I do think that us trying to, like, the idea of formulating good processes within our government and within the city, I don't know that this needs any extreme changes, but I do think that it's good work for us to be reviewing something, looking at it, making sure it fits what the community is now. Because I'm sure the population, even in 1966, is not reflective of what. I'm talking like size-wise, people,
First
how
of all,
much
yeah,
growth we
it
had
had to be
had.
smaller because.
Yeah, we were a
it's called
village.
Out as a village.
We were a village, and
Less
like
than
in some of that
3,000.
language, just making it more contemporary. I really think that this is a worthwhile look, and hopefully a process that we can put in place that it just kind of occurs. I know other communities do this on the regular, and maybe nothing goes to the voters to be changed in those
Maybe.
that,
We-
you know,
we-
you
we don't know.
evaluate.
We don't know because we haven't looked.
That's just it. You don't know what you don't know.
And we'll need
So-
some clarification, I think, internally.
Sure.
Like, I don't know Sheila, she's the clerk of council, if she actually has a journal where she writes yes or no vote for every vote, but that's what it says right here. I don't know if
You
have a
should be
big-
doing it
a
according
big-
to charter.
A big book where Sheila writes yes, no. So, I mean, that's literally what it says right here.
And Melanie, I think some other things come out of this too. We may want to start doing things the way they're spelled out in the charter
Well-
because we've lost that that discipline, and maybe we want to reinstill that discipline.
It
So
was-
by looking at it,
Mhm.
we'll know that. So
It was a good exercise. When I came onto council, to your point, I read this, because I don't know, I read it, the whole thing, but I didn't recall a lot of it until I reread it recently. And I was surprised. There were things in here that I thought, oh, I forgot that. I didn't even know that was the case. And then there were some things that were very antiquated and, you know, kind of entertaining to read, but, you know, we probably should look at that and decide. And it might require, to both of your points, kind of circling back to, you know, is this how we still do it? Or should we be doing it this way?
right. Or should we make some minor changes?
Or
You see, and.
That's my speech.
Sure.
I'm sorry. I think Melanie just brought up an important point. Should we be doing this as it's being described? I agreed at the time of your town hall when this subject came up, with Mr. LeMay's comment, that if we, rather than overall review, if there are problems that are identified, let's identify those problems, have those discussions, and deal with those problems. To me, it doesn't make a lot of sense to potentially, and I'm not saying it's a goal, but to put by this process that's being described, the way it's being described, to have the potential of tearing things down to the roots and then rebuilding it. And I think that is not the way to approach this. The timeline, I don't find respectfully realistic. I know I understand the ambition to try to get it done, get it on this November ballot. This is so fundamentally important to the city, what you're describing to undertake. Without even commenting on, do we have to do it or not do it? It is so fundamental. You know, when we just finished an initiative regarding sidewalks, the conversation about that went on for months and months. And finally, council wanted to have town halls to even get 3 town halls, to even get people's thoughts as to, do you want sidewalks or not? We had 3 surveys about sidewalks that lasted over the course of years. And finally, it went to referendum. Here you're talking about not even soliciting the opinion of the community first as to what do they think? Do they want to see a charter review? Or are they comfortable with the way their government operates?
I think we got.
And I think it's important that we solicit that. I know that in the whereas clause, and I don't really know who these people are, you know, Tony cites a group called Proud Residents of Pepper Pike signed a petition requesting a process review and charter review.
Well, we all received that. No.
We all got a copy of it.
Yeah, let me finish. You have a copy of it, but where's the transparency for the community? So they know who this group is that the council is apparently thinking of relying upon to motivate a full charter review of the city. This is, 20, 30 people, some of them, a lot of them a single household, man and wife, man and woman. So I think I would urge the council, if this is your instinct that we need a charter review, a full charter review, that we first solicit that opinion of the community and see what is the community reaction. It's their government. It's not our government. And do they really want to, in other communities where they have built into the charter, the event of periodic charter reviews, that's something that those communities decided before when they adopted their charter. Here, we are silent on any charter reviews, which is why there hasn't been one since 1960, whatever. To me, that's more than interesting. I think that's significant that this community, in its forming, did not create a periodic charter review. Okay, I respect that, members of the council, some or all, may want to see some variation on a charter review. Well, I think we should ask our community, what do you think? If we can go to the extent that we did to get their opinion about sidewalks, I certainly think we can solicit their opinions about, what do you think about, prospectively changing the way your government operates before we go undertaking a process that could result in that. I have some concern. Let me just finish, please, because I may as well put it all out so I don't piecemeal this. I have some concerns about the participation of any council members or me on a charter commission. We don't have anything in our charter describing, so it is a policy choice that you guys get to make. Should you be part of the charter commission? I think it's a bad idea. I see many communities where there is absolutely no elected official participating in this. It's a citizen resident directed effort that's selected. Let's say there'd be, 4 people selected by council, 3 by the mayor. They're the commission, whatever the number ends up being. They operate, they need legal advice. This is the guy who provides legal advice to that sort of commission, the law director, because he knows what is appropriate or could be suggested into charter changes, react to those residents' concerns as they read things. Council can come before the commission and provide its input, but there wouldn't be the untoward influence of a mayor or a council person being on that commission saying, this is how we think it ought to be. I don't think that's necessarily the right role for the council. That's a policy choice. I acknowledge that. But I've seen many communities where it's only citizens who are on this, not the members, not the elected officials who participate in this. And I would recommend that. The 7-year business, I'm lost on that one. Tony.
And there is, on that one, there's a little risk because the leading case in Ohio upheld a 2-year residency requirement that I think it was Stowe, City of Stowe, had in their charter. State law has a 1-year residency requirement, and somebody was making the argument
For doing what?
for holding a seat on council.
This is not a holding a seat.
No. Follow me here. It's a principle. It's not a specific.
Okay.
So don't get lost in the concrete. There is a
Duh.
what's that?
Don't be insulting.
He's making a joke.
The now you've thrown me off my train of thought.
I'm glad. Because you were trying to hurry up of mine.
The objection is that there's federal case law that says you cannot have restrictions on the holding of office, and charter review commission are office holders that do not advance the government's interest. And the longer you have as a restriction on these things, the more risk you're facing. They've allowed 2 years for holding office on a council as a restriction. There's another community that I'm associated with that has 3 years, and I've always been a little bit worried about that was going to be the cutoff. As you get up longer, people are going to say, what's the difference between somebody who's been here 5 years and somebody who's been here 7 years? And I don't see it as a huge risk, but it is a risk.
Can
I
speak to
viewed
that
it-
as well, actually.
And just to clarify though, just to give background on where this is coming from, these are coming from neighboring communities who did charter reviews. I mean, a lot of this structure is coming from information about some of our neighboring communities and nearby communities who have done very similar things. This isn't just something Tony created out of whole cloth that he just, as he was sitting writing it down. These are, trying to use somebody else's structure that was successful.
Other communities have had council members on the commission.
I said that.
And, the ultimate word of the citizens isn't whether we should do a charter review. It will be if there are any changes that we suggest when they vote yes or no, which is what they did on the sidewalks. So this process is actually similar to the sidewalks, except we skip all of the stuff in between. I don't think we need to ask the community whether they want a charter review. I think we owe them the good practice of doing
Well,
a charter review.
I respectfully disagree. I
And
think we
nobody's
should ask
saying
the
that we should
community if they
recreate it.
want such a thing.
Nobody's saying we want to tear it down and build it back up. I mean, if you read this, you will see that there are things here that and it's actually a good practice. Like, for example, the vice mayor is supposed to be appointed by council, and I don't know that we did it that way. I mean, I'm just, what? Until this year.
No,
Until
in
this
prior
year.
years, it has always been appointed by council.
So, but I mean, I could go through a lot of things in here that are antiquated, including things that don't incorporate women, don't incorporate the kind of media that we currently use. I mean, and there have been some tweaks along the way, but there's a lot of antiquated stuff in here.
Can I speak to the 7 years? I would not be able to be on this commission.
Okay.
I find that extremely exclusionary. I went through my whole street. There's 29 houses. Over a third of the residents of my street would not be on this commission. And I think you're just wiping out a huge swath of the community if you set a 7-year standard. And I understand you need to live somewhere to get a sense of the place. But I also think you are losing people who come from other places who might have some sort of special expertise, or even if they were just paying attention and going to council meetings wherever they came from, who might have something to contribute. Where if you've lived in one place your whole life that has had the same charter for, almost 60 years, you need to balance that, depth of knowledge with newcomers, really. So I'm not opposed to having some sort of like requirement, like Steve mentioned, a year, 2 years, whatever it is. I assume if you moved here 4 months ago, you're probably not going to want to be involved in this anyway. But I think 7 years is really extreme.
7 years eliminates approximately 30%
Yeah.
of the households in Pepper Pike.
But it's well below the mean.
I don't know what that means.
It's well below, many people have lived here much longer. And one thing I will tell
Sure
you
it
from
is.
my experiences looking at policy and sitting in another seat, and I could give you examples like how people responded, for example. A good example would be during COVID, how people with younger kids who are more new in the school responded to the challenges of what kids should be in the school. A lot of the younger parents reached out to me and said that they thought that the older kids shouldn't be in the school because their kids needed to be in school. None of the older parents with older kids said that they thought it should be more balanced because they had a look back. So that is I do think that when you've been in a community, you have ability to look back and you can learn a lot from seeing how things went previously, knowing your community members, understanding the surrounding communities. And I do think that takes time. I know, even living here a good part of my life, when I came on council, spent a lot of time reviewing, reading, listening to my fellow council people and talking to them because I really wanted to understand what had been happening. Even though I had been attending council meetings, I hadn't been at every one, I hadn't participated in things. So I just think that we don't want to lose the experience in our community, and we don't want to lose people who have committed so many years of their lives to this community and paid taxes for so many years and volunteered and donated. So I do value, I once was a new community member too. I do value both, but I think that you have to really look to that experience, that wisdom, that look back, and those connections to the community that sometimes take years and years to develop.
Can I offer a compromise? You could limit certain positions, number of positions to those people who have been here with the 7 years.
I think that your chance of you getting a bunch of people who have lived here for 3 years who are dying to be on this commission are slim.
Yeah.
But I think it should be open to almost anyone who wants to be on it because this is a commitment. This is going to be a big time commitment.
It is a commitment.
So, I don't want to be on it for that. I have too much else going on right now, as we all do, right? But I think I can think of people who I think would be really positive contributors who are engaged and smart. And, yeah, you need to know the community, but it's also just a matter of, reading, neighboring communities' documents, digging into the law. There's aspects of it that you don't necessarily have to have some decades long knowledge of Pepper Pike to execute. And there's going to be plenty of that on the commission, regardless of what this number is set at. 1, 2, 3, 7. Drop that limit. You're going to maybe get an extra person or two who wouldn't have otherwise. And I think you're going to have a more well-rounded result.
Well, council is going to choose from the candidates who present themselves.
Right.
So
You could lower it to like an elected official. You have to live here, what, a year before you can?
well, no, I wouldn't. I think
You don't
You know,
have
the
to
commit-
live-
the
there's
commit-
nothing in our charter about living here to be on council. So far, it's length of time.
Oh, no.
I think that
No.
Melanie's pleas for, commitment and longevity are important, and I would be comfortable decreasing it to 4 years.
Why
I just,
four?
my
I guess
view
I
is
just-
we don't have Class A,
Yeah.
Class B residents. We don't have preferred stock. We don't have common stock. It's who gets to participate. We're all shareholders in this community, regardless if you moved in whenever. I agree with Jackie. They may, you know, I don't know that someone just moved here recently really wants to, or would feel comfortable being involved in this, but we don't discriminate against people. We
It's
just
not
don't
meant
do
to
that.
discriminate.
This
It's
isn't
meant to
discrimination.
efficiently produce a thorough process by June, that we can get through all this information
In 3 months.
and do a good job in 3 months. And I think, and I just think we have to really focus in and not, and that, I think that, to me, that will help us get to that.
Wherever this lands, it deserves time. It's just, that this time frame is not realistic,
What if we
guys.
did it for spring?
Tony, in your mind's eye, if you get a pool of applicants for this, you will look at their background and you could balance it out. I hope if you
Yeah.
get 50 applicants, you could make sure you have some newer residents and older residents.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So that through the process, you make sure you get, so
Well,
I guess
I'm
I'm,
thinking not in terms of newer residents and older residents, but how old are they, you know, chronologically? Some younger residents and some older residents.
Yeah.
And all of them who have some commitment
To the
to the
community.
community, which
And
is shown
beyond
by
just,
the amount of time
beyond
they've
just
lived
doing
there.
this one thing.
I just, having all those people in the pool would be, I just think having a shorter time period, 2 years would be, we'll have enough people in the pool to balance out and make sure we get
Yeah.
30-year residents and 2-year residents.
Just to clarify, other cities have the time frame. Tony didn't just manufacture
Yeah, I know.
that. I mean, he didn't just come up with it on his own to be arbitrary. We're using formats that other
Yeah,
cities.
I guess the question is, has the turnover in Pepper Pike been more extreme than other places where it would kick out more people? I don't know the answer to that.
I would say no, because I looked, at one point I looked at the census data because I kept hearing we're seeing a demographic change. And I looked at the census data and the census data was flat. So there hasn't been a demographic change because people get older. And,
Well, yeah, but I
you
mean, in
know,
terms of new residents, that turnover is what I'm talking about.
no, because
Because
that,
older people could move in too, which wouldn't reflect.
yes, but by looking at the census data, you see the pools of people are the same, which demonstrates to you you're not seeing a demographic shift. Yes, you're getting new people, but they're replacing, well, I guess they're replacing, they're similar, people are being replaced in a similar. It shows you a process, if you look at the numbers. We're not younger than we were or older than we were, we're the same. For whatever reason, probably because of schools.
Well, I mean, I'm comfortable going down to 4. Anybody else have a thought?
I'm really opposed to that. I think that if you are doing a, review process of applications you're getting, I think you want to cast a wide net. And if someone applies who's lived here for 2 years and you think, you know what, you don't have the depth of knowledge, then they don't get on the commission. But that's what the application process is for. I don't think you want a blanket statement.
Okay,
I think, I mean, that's fine to assess them that way, but they're already getting dinged on their connections to the community and their extensive time they spent involved in the community. They're already getting dinged in the assessment by that. I mean, just by the nature that they've only lived here for 2 years. I mean, perhaps if they moved from like Moreland Hills to here. Now, that doesn't mean they're not a good person and that they wouldn't be really successful, in that role, but that is a fact. They're not going to have been here. They're not going to have the connections in the community, I wouldn't think.
All right, well, we've plowed through a lot. Why don't we let this percolate
okay.
for a week and see what.
I'll make the changes that we've talked about and we'll talk about it again.
We'll talk
But I would
about
like
it.
to try and get it done in 2 readings
Yeah.
because.
Maybe there'll be some more feedback from the community also. That will be better. All right. Yeah, from my agenda. Excuse me. I have an agenda. Oh, we're up to the committees and department heads. Chiefs, do you have anything? You're good.
I assume that ordinance was just placed on first reading.
We were just placed on first reading.
Yeah, gotcha.
Mr. Advent, congratulations on a nice snow removal this past week. Thank you. Spread a lot of salt.
Only put down what the streets will take.
Mr. Shi, you've talked a lot tonight. Anything more?
Nothing to add.
We'll be moving to an executive session shortly. We'll be back together next week, so I don't really have much to add. I hope everyone's been enjoying our Fun Fact Fridays. It's been fun doing it. I hope you like our new logo for our 100th centennial. A lot of work and graphic design went into that, and we've gotten some very nice compliments from people.
Who designed that?
Huh?
Who gets credit for that?
A graphic design company.
Oh, okay. Oh, we hired someone to do that. Okay. I wasn't curious.
I didn't see it. Is it on
I
the
thought it was
website?
maybe in-house.
Well, it wasn't in-house. The in-house had a lot of comments regarding it.
Sheila, she does everything.
But it turned out to be a nice product in the end. And it was a lot of hours, a lot of work to get. Council, you have any comments?
I actually do, which, sorry to bend everyone's ear again, but I did want to talk about our council calendar just because it was in the minutes from last meeting and I said I would follow up. And I do have a proposal for our meeting schedule for 2024. I was looking towards the end of this year, which would be November and December. Those seem to be the meetings that we would have conflicts due to Thanksgiving and to Christmas, and we have a budget meeting thrown in there. So I would like to propose adding 2 additional special meeting dates that we have on the calendar as pure placeholders for everybody to be able to schedule around. The holidays and the end of the year are busy times for everybody with their families and commitments and all of the things that we do. And I think that we could be much more effective if we know when we could potentially have those meetings also for the public. So I would like to propose an extra special meeting on Wednesday, November 13th, which would be the week before. So it could potentially be special meeting on the 13th of November and then special meeting on the 20th of November. If we don't need one of them, we can cancel it, but we know that the regular meeting is most likely not going to happen because of Thanksgiving. It still would give us 2 work days within that month. I would also like to propose one on Wednesday, December 11th, which again would be the week prior. So we would have a meeting on December 11th, one on 12/18, and then for sure our Christmas Day meeting would not happen, but we would still have 2 meeting dates on the calendar. That my other suggestion would be for Joe to maybe look at those dates and use one of those 4 potential meetings for our annual budget meeting. That we do it a Wednesday evening instead of a Saturday during December. All of us have families, and post-pandemic, there are lots of commitments that come up. So I'm trying to be proactive so that we can all do our jobs as council people, but also have the time set aside that we can have a predictable schedule. So I'd like everybody to think about it. If you need me to put it in writing, I can. But I don't know if we need to vote on our calendar. I don't know the next process for that. That would be a question for our law director. If we can just add meetings, if everybody would be amenable to that. So
I say bravo to the suggestion.
thank you. I like to be organized. I do schedule and do this professionally. So it is a forte of mine. But I love to be organized. I like predictability. So if this helps everybody, yay! I'm happy to do it every year I'm on council. But thank you for this feedback, Scott.
And I'm so appreciative. 'cause
Is there any other period where there's a conflict on a holiday during the year that we should address, or is this just is it?
I didn't see anything real significant because
Okay.
it was like there is one during Passover. Melanie kind of suggested that wasn't
it's in the middle of the
necessarily
holiday, so I think it's fine.
right. And then the only other one was Juneteenth, that there was Juneteenth, but I believe City Hall is open for
Yeah.
Juneteenth. That it's not, we're not recognizing that yet. So I think that this year we could have that unless there was opposition to it.
Okay, why don't we take these dates? if you can circulate them, great. Otherwise, I don't know if Sheila got them all down. Why don't you?
Sheila, we could talk tomorrow.
Why don't you
Yeah,
shoot
and
them?
usually we handle these based on quorum. We don't cancel meetings way in advance.
I would keep them on the calendar just in case, but it's like we would have 2 special meetings. Because Steve
And
said
we
by
can-
ordinance, we may not cancel
Yeah,
a
But
regular.
we can do specials
Yeah.
that week. We don't need to schedule them way in advance because what ends up happening is we've scheduled these. We only have 4 people because everyone's on vacation. It's hard to plan these like this. It's always been more consistent to stick with the basic calendar. And then as the time approaches, then we deal with the special meetings.
But
Once
I
we
see,
know
but I'm seeing
everyone's schedule at the time because everyone's schedule changes.
I recognize that, but
on
I'm
the fly.
seeing a for sure conflict on
I just
2
know
regular
that
meetings that we
After
will.
doing this I'm going on 16 years of being
And I
clerk.
appreciate you, Sheila.
I've scheduled a lot of meetings and I think I've got a handle on it.
I think the idea is to get people in thinking ahead of time.
I know,
Yeah,
well,
I
So that
here's,
we avoid the quorum.
here
the
is
quorum
what I
issue.
do. I don't schedule vacations when there's a council meeting. That's my general rule, unless my daughter's getting married. So that's.
I guess what we're saying is like, well,
I'm
like
looking
for
more-
example, the day before Thanksgiving, I've been told that we almost never have a meeting. It would be nice to know that we had a meet, whether we had a meeting. And also to not only have 2 meetings at most in November and December and then not meet until the end of January. I felt very uneasy about only having 2 meetings until I think we also had the Saturday meeting, which we then packed. I would have preferred that Saturday meeting where we did the budget to be just clean budget or budget and 1 emergency item. We just jam packed it because we only had 2 meetings that we knew we were really likely to have. I think then we ended up meeting the week of New Year's, which was fine with me, but a lot of people were away. So I am very sympathetic to the fact that, I don't know, I get really uneasy that we're so light in November and December. I feel like it's the end of the year. And
I think that, Emmy's made a great suggestion here, and we should just schedule the 2 other special meetings for the 13th of November and the 11th of December, and then use them if we need them.
That was more my point, is a
Use them if we need
placeholder.
I'd say I have to check a bunch of calendars.
I respect all
I'm sure
of that.
everyone else has to check a lot of calendars.
This is why I wanted
That's
to
why you're
discuss
saying now.
it
I think the
in
idea is,
February instead
Right.
of November,
Okay,
which is
so-
what's happened the past couple
I'm
of years.
not criticizing your idea at all, Emmy. What I would ask is that you simply get your list over to Sheila. She can get it out to everybody so that people can check their calendars and react to, what we already know are conflicted dates.
yeah, because Christmas is one of our meetings. and we don't-
December and
we're not open
Thanksgiving,
on
or
Christmas.
maybe we can get some, provisional things depending on, what we have going on at the time.
Fair enough. And Sheila, thank you for the feedback. I never want to put
Well,
extra
it's-
burdens
it's
on
just-
you.
We don't schedule this far in advance anyway. The regulars, they just show up on the calendar, usually a few weeks before there is a meeting. So
Okay,
we have some time.
all right. Everyone has lots of calendar checks to do.
Labor Day, planning and zoning is on there.
Yeah, it always
Yeah.
is. So we always move
Yeah.
that to the next week.
So we
Mhm.
can
Yeah.
plan that.
Yeah, that always gets moved to next week.
And that
And the-
it made me think about it because we canceled the last planning and zoning. How far ahead do people have to submit their plans so we know we have a clean,
They have
canceled
to,
meeting?
we have to notice neighbors 2 weeks before the meeting.
So if
So-
nothing's happened before that, we know we're,
Definitely.
Unless there is a lot split and consolidation where you do not have to notice a neighbor, and that can be on an agenda. Or if there's a discussion item that the mayor would want on a
Okay.
planning meeting agenda.
just for planning purposes, because it's nice to know.
Yeah.
But whenever it's gotten canceled by Sheila sends out the notice, it's because it lacks submissions. We're never just
Okay,
canceling.
and that's what I was questioning, what the time frame was, because it's happened maybe 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. I just curious because.
And the March one, I just found out today, we will not have a March meeting.
Oh, that's good.
But we thought we were, and then Don determined we don't need to have. a
Okay,
meeting,
and
so.
listen, I know you can't tell who's gonna submit,
Well, we at least have that 2-week window.
which
And
is
then-
really nice, but
yeah.
you don't know until that day hits.
Yeah, but even so, they made that 2 week, but then Don determined they didn't need a
Okay,
variance.
so we'll blame Don.
So, yeah, there's a lot of factors
Yeah, we
driving.
Or thank him.
We thank Don.
Depending. Well, it's interesting, Don. I like it.
Okay. Alrighty, any audience comments? Take it around the room. Get started in the corner.
Graham, 31437 Shaker. What's the status of our sewer? I mean, they put the sewer line in. We haven't been notified of any fees, any tie-in dates, it's not what, we're just sitting here.
Don,
We have a process that we have to get finalized by the county on some activity that's going on at the pump station. And until they've given us their green light and accepted it, we can't let anybody tie in. I am hoping that we are within days of being able to let people know.
Because I think my last council meeting I was at was in, I don't know, late in the fall. And that was, I asked Ben, and they said, oh, it's the pump station. Did they not know the pump station needed work before they did all this work?
The pump station work has been underway. The work was essentially done at the pump station. They were waiting for a couple of components with supply chain issues. And then there was also an issue with getting First Energy to come out and de-energize the old pump station and re-energize the new one and then put a permanent conduit in. A lot of coordination for not a lot of actual work, but we just have to follow this process. So we are very, very close to being totally done. And then the county will accept the maintenance on the pump station. So it sounds like a bunch of engineering gobbledygook. I realize that, but we have to go through all these different steps and we are following the process. We've been delayed a little bit by First Energy. We were delayed a little bit by some supply chain issues with some components, and we are waiting to get everything settled. The sewer itself is ready to go.
Once the county says, okay, the pump station's working,
Yes,
how soon will then the people be able to tie in?
almost immediately. Yeah, we'll just notice everybody that you can tie in and hire a contractor, and then you go through a process with the building department and pull a permit. The contractor pulls a permit. It takes, maybe a couple of days to go through that.
And our next property bill will reflect all of our charges. Because I haven't gotten anything about
Not until January of next year.
25.
Yep.
So, but we haven't received any letter of
We haven't certified anything to the county until that'll occur in the August timeframe. Then it'll be on the next January's duplicate. We also just recently, towards the end of last year, finalized the actual acceptance of the note. It's at 5.02%, which was the going rate. And we'll be doing the final calculation on that. And obviously adding the interest on there and then dividing by 40 because it's 20 years semi-annually.
okay.
But it's an extra year because it wasn't done by the end of August.
In the corner, you had a question?
Yes, I want to follow up on my 1228 letter to you regarding.
I'm sorry, can you say your name for Sheila, please?
Grace Barber, 33,000 Shaker Boulevard. Following up on my 1228 letter to you regarding handicap access to these meetings, so that that someone with a handicap has the same access to these meetings and not being singled out. If there's been any possibilities of some of my suggestions, like possibly someone else learning how to operate the elevator, somebody, maybe 10 to 20 minutes after meetings, staying here to talk to you, to the council.
Well, you're always welcome to confer with your counsel, simply not here at the conclusion of the meeting. It's because we need to treat everybody fairly and equally. And we have one ADA access elevator to this level. And Sheila stays after meetings already, as you know, to monitor and operate that. And no, we don't have people who, the building is essentially, when these meetings are done, principally because of your concern, respectfully, we need to treat everyone fair. And that's why we have been having to clear the space and secure the building from the public at the conclusion of the meeting. And we have plenty of, I've checked to your question regarding handicap parking spaces. We absolutely meet the law regarding handicap parking spaces out in that parking lot. And that's all I really have on the subject.
But you've had singled this person out consistently in the meetings where other people have stayed after meetings and have talked to council members. And why can't somebody else learn how to operate it?
Because we don't employ people to stay into the evening after the meeting to operate the elevator. That's the answer. That's the answer. We don't employ someone to do that. Ma'am, next. I'm sorry, Grace. I know you're frustrated with it, but I don't have a better solution for you.
I just really think we might want to look into having a better elevator. I mean,
Yeah.
we want people, we don't, if we're all of a sudden putting up these signs to basically get everyone out of here because we don't want an issue for the people who have access issues, that already is problematic. We want people to be able to interact with their neighbors and talk to their council people here. I know they can call, my phone number's on the website, you can call me at home, but it's not the same sometimes when you're here and you have the thought. It would be, to me, it would be the right thing to have either an elevator that we can more easily operate, upgrade the elevator, so that everybody can have access and we're not pushing people out of here. It just seems.
I'd love to have a better elevator. And as
We can
and
afford a
as
lot
you
of
know,
things. I think we can afford an
there was an initiative by the administration towards the end of last year to revamp this areas, which would have improved our ADA access to these areas. Hopefully we can continue those conversations with council.
I think that was
and
at
get it
council's
funded.
initiative that we wanted to improve it. We just wanted to do a modest improvement on the back so we could have a better elevator, maybe a somewhat bigger space. And I just think that access is so important, and we don't know, we're talking about one particular person, we don't know who else might
Doesn't
be
come.
being denied access. This is a very
I don't think we've
personally
ever
important
denied any,
subject to me.
respectfully, I don't think we've ever denied anyone
don't
access.
know.
We're not dying, we're not saying that if we don't have a system that is self-reliant for somebody to be able to come in here and access stuff, that they have to rely on other people to get them in, there are people who are going to avoid coming. That in and of itself is not the welcoming space that our governmental building should be to all of the people in our community or beyond who would want to access this. So I think it is a very sensitive topic. I have a family member who happens to have a wheelchair, who would have a very tough time being able to come in here. And I think that it is something that we need to be mindful of and really look at. And
I
thank
agree.
you, Grace, for speaking up about it, because that it really isn't right.
And I urge council to support initiatives to improve this public area so that we can do just the things that concern you.
And I want to give you my cell number and have whoever needs to call me. Anytime.
Anyone else? Yes.
Jean Gascoigne, 30496 West Landerwood, with what? Oh, I thought you were making a sign.
No, I was scratching my face.
Isn't it the code? No, 30496 West Landerwood.
I have fleas.
I wasn't gonna say, but first of all, I just would like to say, I don't think it's a matter of agree or disagree whether something should be fixed. I think that the two women sort of here have the idea that it's for the access for people. Not a matter of agree or disagree if you think it's the right thing or wrong. I mean, it is what it is, and it should be accessible. But what I want to ask or say, I know we're not supposed to ask questions, so I'm gonna say and hope somebody could get back to me about that house on South Woodland. It's been under construction for years. No, it's not years, but at least 1 year. I don't know if anyone knows what I'm talking about. It's on the south side of South Woodland. It is between Lander and, help me out, anybody. It's an eyesore. It's a mud patch in the front. There's latrines that have been there longer than you're
Between
older,
Lander and
you know.
Brainerd?
It's just, take a drive. It's on the south side of South Woodland. You are so picky is not the right word, but talking about all these rules and years and this and that and sheds. Take a drive if you aren't familiar, and I can't remember what the other
No,
street is.
we'll have the building department check it out, make sure they're
It's just
code compliant,
unbelievable.
that their
Look at
silt
what
fences
sheds
are
are there.
appropriate, that their permits are in order. We'll check it out, Joe.
Okay,
We'll check it out, Gene.
thank you.
Anyone else?
Vera Bar Savage, 29600 Shaker. I just want to say to Don, thank you for your presentation. It's so exciting with the 65% for walkability that we are seeing that going to happen. Just a second comment. Regarding the city charter, my understanding that the city charter is like the constitution of the city. And I don't even understand how you would, if you do all these changes, how you would even get that on the ballot. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I would like to see who these, to be transparent, you're always talking about transparency, who is Proud Residents? Is that like the Proud Boys or something? So I'm just wondering who these Proud Residents are. I wasn't, contacted about any of this charter stuff. So as, has been brought up, we really need residents involved in this. And, anyway, that's my comments.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Lastly, I apologize. Hope last, I'll keep it brief. I want to thank Mr. Levine because one thing when you had the 2024-03 in contrast to 2023-18, why I nodded my head vigorously when we said instead of, what crystallized it for me was the intent is now clear and execution matches intent. Right? I think what was unsettling, at least for myself, perhaps other people, was the perceived opportunity for ambiguity, or I dare use the word arbitrariness of what would happen. Like, well, if we feel like reviewing something, we will, and then it can be anything. Like, that made me very, very uncomfortable. So I much appreciate the much more focused definition of execution. And as soon as you said it, like, that's it. Like, that was it. So thank you for that. I'd also ask that we keep that in mind in a couple of other initiatives. There's a theme here. We talk about the charter review. I think that's why I get that same feeling of I am all for councilmen. I immediately, no, like not cool. Like there's things in 2024 that need to change, updates for technology. But are we talking about things that are obvious? Anyone should, or are we talking about tearing it down to the roots and building it back up? Well, I know you shake your head no. Okay. But that's you shaking your head no. That's not the definition of the execution. So sitting here in this chair, I can't tell the difference between what you probably mean and what's going to happen when you put 11 people in the room because, hey, carte blanche, do whatever you want to do. I would suggest that if you want to get community input, which respectfully I think you should do because Mayor Bain is dead on, like look how much time you spent on something relatively innocuous. What's the harm? And like, do we get paid extra for finishing this by November? Like, what's the rush? Like, if we're going to do something, let's do it right, which I hate to keep using sidewalks, but we said it over and over, and it was correct. If we're going to do it, let's do it right. Be deliberate. Take your time. Get through it. Right? And so I'm talking fast because I want to get through this quickly because it's late. Back on the planning commission reviews, I get that same itch of like, well, what are we really talking about here? Because Mr. Byron is talking about holding a tight standard of what does it mean to review? What standard are we holding ourselves to? Not an attorney, but what it feels like I'm hearing is, well, I don't know, if we don't like it, I guess we can just overturn it. I know I'm speaking very, very broad terms when I say that, but that's what it comes across as, which is no. Like, because if you don't want to hold them accountable, if you don't want to have a finding that they've made an arbitrary decision, not holding yourself to any kind of standard, documented standard, what does that open you up to? It's obvious. Opens you up to the possibility of making what could be perceived as an arbitrary decision. It's not good, like from an optics standpoint. Speaking of optics, one last point, and I promise I'm done. I don't understand why the 4-year requirement is a hill that we have to die on. Right, because again, Mr. LeMay, thank you. You hit it dead on. You're going to have the opportunity to look at the base from all dimensions of demographics. If you want to pick somebody that's been here for 20 years and somebody that's been here for 5 minutes, that's a choice that you can make. Why do we have to cut it off at 4 when you have every opportunity to make sure you have diversity of longevity and age and economics or whatever aspect you want. So I'd also ask you to pay very close attention to what the optics of that's going to look like. Because if somebody hears, hey, they want to do what? Like, I've been here for 3 years. I'd be really, really good at that. I guess I can't participate. Do you need that? Like, do you really need that optics heading? Because it's not good. When you have a perfectly valid mechanism of ensuring you have a long-standing residents in the president. I went longer than I wanted to, but I promise I'm done. Thank you. William Thompson, 30500 Providence.
Thank you.
Pretend I said that early on.
Paul Melvey, 31749 Gates Mills Boulevard. After the great presentation on the Gates Mills Trail, I'm hopeful that the council or the city will move forward with the application for the funds to continue up the rest of Gates Mills Boulevard.
Thank you. All right. And with that, I think we'll entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of discussing the appointment of a public official.
So moved.
Second. Roll call, please.
Yes.
Mr. Knoll? Ms. Matra?
Yes.
Ms. Waltman?
Yes.
Mrs. Skodak? Yes. Mr. Lemay?
Yes.
Mr. Gentile?
Yes.
Dr. Wong?
Yes,
How hard it was to get.
excuse me, but I have to wake up early for surgery, so I am going to jet.
Patients are more important.
Maybe you reserve the right to take
There. For surgery.
Okay.
Good night.